Hello everyone and welcome to Techstrong TV. Today is Tuesday, August 16th, and I'm your host, Natan Solomon. In today's show, we'll bring you some awesome interviews with incredible guests from around the world, so stay tuned. As always, I'll start with our Techstrong news recap, filling you in on the biggest tech headlines that are making waves. Then, Alan sits down with AB Pirasamy, co-founder and CEO at Min.io. In this interview, Alan and AB will discuss Min.io's recent decision to add external table support for Snowflake Analytics. Next, Alan speaks with Bob Slapnick, co-founder and COO at Brazen Cloud, and Lawrence Pingree, CTO at Brazen Cloud. In this interview, Bob and Lawrence make the case that we need more than SOAR, security orchestration, automation, and response, and that we need to move beyond just the SOC automation that we're doing today. Alan then talks with Daniela Ponce, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Sysdig, and Anna Bellick, Director of Thought Leadership at Sysdig. Daniela and Anna discuss the recently announced machine learning-powered cloud detection and response, CDR, to combat cryptojacking. We then bring you to RSA, where Charlene sat down with Nikhil Gupta, CEO and co-founder of ArmorCode. Charlene and Nikhil talk about ArmorCode's AppSecOps platform. We're then joined by our very own Cody J. Brown, who will hop on to tell us about some upcoming webinars. Then, we have another episode of CISO Talk with host Mitch Ashley. In this episode, Mitch Ashley is joined by Jennifer Leggio of Netography and Mike Rothman of Techstrong Research to discuss the best ways CISOs can keep key stakeholders properly informed about threats, risk, and security programs, and why proactive communication is an essential part of high-performing teams and the foundation of a solid security strategy. We then go to KubeCon Cloud Native Con, where Mitch met with CodeFresh CEO Raziel Tabib. In this interview, Mitch and Raziel discuss GitOps adoption and the Argo project, a CNCF project for building and managing continuous delivery workflows on Kubernetes. Next, we have two episodes of View of the Zard. In the first, Mike interviews the newly appointed One Identity CEO, Mark Logan, on his vision for the provider of an identity management platform that is being spun out of Quest. Then, Mike interviews Grant Gibson, CISO of CIBR, which is pronounced cyber, as they discuss why organizations need to change the way the value of cybersecurity is measured. We then go back to KubeCon Cloud Native Con, where Alan met up with Owen Garrett, Head of Products and Community at DeepFence. Alan and Owen talk about how you can improve the security of your applications with vulnerability scanning. Finally, at RSA, Alan sat down with Chris Scharf, sales engineer at HackerOne, and the two discuss how HackerOne is crowdsourcing the researcher community. That's what we have coming up for you here on Techstrong TV. Let's get the show started. Enjoy. Hi again, everyone. Here are the headlines for August 16th. First in the news, according to a new report from Global Witness, Facebook has failed to detect blatant election-based information in ads ahead of Brazil's 2022 election. The nonprofit submitted ads containing false information, such as the wrong election date, incorrect voting methods, and objections to the integrity of the election. This is the fourth time Global Witness has tested Meta's ability to catch rule violations on its platforms, and in all instances, Meta has failed to catch them. Meta says it has developed tools to promote reliable information about elections, but its system still allows disinformation to spread. Next, many Chinese tech giants have shared details of their algorithms with the country's regulators. The Cyberspace Administration of China released a list of 30 algorithms with a brief description of their purpose from companies such as Alibaba, Tencent, and ByteDance. The information in the public filing is sparse, so it is unclear how much companies had to disclose. This move to register algorithms is unprecedented. Neither the US nor the European Union have introduced any law like this, although this is only the latest development in the past 2 years, as China has tried to tighten its grip on the technology sector. In other news, not everyone is happy about the proposed US tax credits for purchases of electric vehicles. Under the $430 billion climate and energy bill passed by the Senate on Sunday, Congress would allow a $7,500 tax credit for EVs assembled in North America. However, some cars produced in North America may still not qualify for the tax credit if their parts are sourced from China. In response, the EU and South Korea are arguing that these measures are discriminatory and not compliant with the World Trade Organization. Additionally, many of the major car makers would be ineligible for the tax credits because of the parts requirement. Next up, Bitcoin recently popped above $25,000 late on Sunday for the first time since mid-June. Currencies have been moving higher in the past month, following a rise in U.S. stocks, as digital currencies are correlated with the movements in the stock market. Bitcoin's increase in price is also based on a rally in alternative coins. Bitcoin has been stuck between 20 and 24,000, but this small rally could be another sign that inflation pressures are easing, and only time will tell if it will return to its previous high of $65,000. Next in the news, Ring announced its plans to partner with Hollywood studio MGM to create a new TV show. The new show, Ring Nation, would take viral footage from the Ring's cameras along the style of America's Funniest Home Videos. The show hopes to share a daily dose of life's unpredictable moments. This collaboration is just another example of Amazon's vast business holding that continues to spread across many sectors, with its growth seemingly never ending. On Digital CXO, we have an article discussing the importance of considering user insights for digital transformations. Digital experience intelligence provides a retroactive view of how people interact with a site or application. However, when companies use this data to properly prioritize the user experience, they can make the goal of a customer-centric transformation a reality. To learn more, check out Digital CXO. On Container Journal, we have an article discussing how to develop pod security based on the new Kubernetes guidelines from the NSA. 4 main considerations for pod security include using containers built to run applications as non-root users, running containers with immutable file systems, scanning container images for vulnerabilities, and using a technical control. The article also gives advice for complying with the new guidelines, as well as preventing production issues. To read more, visit Container Journal. Finally, on Security Boulevard, we have an article discussing the Cisco ransomware attack and the community's reaction. Cisco just opened up about a ransomware attack by hackers with links to Russia. The hack was a result of failing to install a month-old Windows update and using a broken multi-factor authentication. Go to Security Boulevard to learn how the community is reacting to this groundbreaking announcement. And that's today's Techstrong News Recap.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Techstrong TV. I'm happy to welcome back to Techstrong TV Anand Babu Parasamy. He's the CEO, co-founder of Min.io. His friends call him AB, and we're going to call him AB here too. The company's website, just to get it out of the way, is min.io or min.io, but it's Min.io is the company's name. Hey AB, welcome.
Great to be back, Alan.
Great to have you. So we spent a little time on the company name and website, but not and you've been on here before, but that doesn't mean everyone out here watching now, knows what the company is about. So why don't we start here, if you don't mind? Give us a little background on Min.io.
Min.io is an object store. Object store is basically the primary storage in the modern cloud native world. Like if you in the past you saw file and block to store your data, but as data grew very big, if you see in all of the cloud, the data is stored in object store. They call it cloud storage, but the technology behind it is object store. And Min.io is an object store, and it's designed to store petabytes of data. And it's open source, and it's the most popular object storage out there, around 1.3 million Docker pulls per day.
Wow, it's crazy. And AB, you've been on the show before, and we went over a little bit of object store, and Min is, as you mentioned, open source as well, and so it's become extremely popular, especially it's part of this new stack, if you will, the new compute stack built around cloud native. It's crazy. I actually had just done an interview with Tim Hawken, one of the original Kube team from Google. we were talking about cloud native being as much a state of mind as it is a collection of software.
Yeah.
And, and it fits into that. And part of that, of course, is scalability, right? When we talk about cloud native, we talk about hyperscale, and that, that's part of an inherent part of that cloud native equation. And MinIO is, one of those, an example of that, ability to really hyperscale up. You were on, I think the last time was in January, so it's been about 6 months. If you don't mind, why don't you share with our audience an update? What have you guys been doing for 6 months?
Yeah, and I'll touch upon one of the recent announcement. It's also a reflection of global industry trend. And if you looked at the storage industry overall, right, the last big innovation in the traditional storage world was hyperconverged interface, but it's still same file and block, that is SAN and NAS type interface, right? And that did not address the scale. And the workloads, like if you see fundamentally, the primary storage workloads was databases and virtual machines, operating system image data and stuff. In the new world, the object storage is basically addressing the same workload at much larger scale. And the class of applications also changed. The virtual machines became containers. And where does the container image store? Object storage. And where does the database store? Object store. And Snowflake is actually the one of the most modern databases out there at scale. And if you look at Snowflake is fundamentally built on object store. And as the multi-cloud initiatives became the priority for most of these modern organizations, the Snowflake went through a change in their design. Like I would say, they announced a new feature called external tables. Instead of you putting all your data in Snowflake, now you can be in control. You can keep data at scale and point Snowflake to your data infrastructure. And Snowflake announced Snowflake and MinIO partnership the last 6 months. That was one of the biggest announcements. And it's actually a reflection of a global trend that is like, it's not just Snowflake, even other databases are beginning to work with us. But Snowflake being one of the early pioneers in this space, it is a significant trend. That is, database, which was the primary workload of SAN and NAS, are now pointing to object store. And also they're going in the right direction in terms of the databases are getting reduced to the query engines. They focus on processing the data and storing the data. They're leaving it to object store. And this combination allows you to build multi-petabyte, like your tables themselves. Who would have thought about a table can be 10 petabytes? Nowadays, it's actually not that scary at all. There are customers using it.
Yep. Let's just make sure we got this straight here for our audience. So, first of all, what we're seeing is the decoupling of storage to the database, right? The database no longer necessarily lives on the same infrastructure as the storage, right? And that in and of itself, you're right, that's radical, right? Because it was always, that was attached, right? It was like this.
Yeah.
That's number one. So now we could have our data stored anywhere where it makes the most sense, whether it's because it's the cheapest, most scalable, fastest, most reliable, what have you. And then point our database to that data, and it acts on it, which is pretty cool when you think about that, right?
Yeah. What you said was actually an important point, right? You being in control means that this time around, right, the data can be in a universal format like Parquet, Compress CSV, like they call it Hive Metastore or Iceberg. There are quite popular open formats. Now you can actually use Databricks Spark to process your data and dump it on back to object store and then point Snowflake at it. You couldn't have this kind of collaboration, this kind of control before. By keeping the data in open format and point Snowflake can pick it up and run queries on those tables. That's what customers like in terms of control, and it can be multi-cloud.
I love it. It's a great. That is great. So Snowflake is one of the companies doing it, and this is about 6 months you guys are doing this now. What kind of pickup are you seeing in the market with this?
This is a new announcement. This has the reason why Snowflake worked on this was because customers started seeing more and more data, and even like given the MinIO scale, there is already quite a bit of data on existing MinIO deployments for customers to be able to point to it. And also, we are seeing that customers are not only having MinIO on multiple clouds, even on-prem. The data is wherever data is getting produced, whether it's edge or private cloud or the public cloud, they are now MinIO's customers are unifying that as multi-cloud, and the data. Then this time Snowflake can directly run queries on this. That was the reason that Snowflake saw this kind of requirement from their customer base, and it's relatively new, but it was very much awaited. I can imagine that the adoption will pick up very quickly.
Yep.
You know, in my mind, this is really hitting on two sort of mega trends that you and Snowflake have kind of latched onto here. The first mega trend, I think, is that it's the move to data anywhere. Right, we have work from anywhere during COVID. Everyone's working from anywhere and everywhere. Well, the data goes with them, right? And so it's data everywhere and anywhere.
Yeah.
We have data on the edge. We have data on devices and things. Just forget people, just things that are connected. We have data there, we have data on the edge. What goes back to the cloud? What doesn't go back to the cloud? Which cloud does it go to? How does all that interact? And we still have private data centers. Let's not forget about them, right? So it's data anywhere.
Yeah.
And if you're going to live in a data anywhere world, you can't expect, if you're a Snowflake or something like that, you got to go where the data is. You can't, if Muhammad can't come to the mountain comes to Muhammad, right?
Yeah.
You can't expect people to bring the data to you like that. Number two, so I've been in technology a really long time. And, the mantra used to be is that everything can be measured, we measure everything, right? And so we kept as much data as we could. And the good news was there was always sort of a Moore's law in effect, where data storage was always getting cheaper, right?
Yeah.
Remember when we used to buy 30, 40 meg hard drives? They were this big, hard cards.
Yeah.
And now I bought a cheap little drone. I bought I think it was 128 gigabit micro SD card, for under $100. I think it was like $60 or something. So, storage has gotten cheaper. But when you start talking about storage at hyperscale, it's not that cheap, right? It's not free, and we see it with our own, for instance, this very Techstrong TV.
Yeah.
We're adding, and we're not, HBO or Netflix, but we're adding terabytes a month. Of data, and I don't get it. Where's all this? But we got to store it somewhere. So we're always on the hunt.
Yeah.
Right? And in a perfect world, I'd like to be able to store my data. First of all, not all data is created equal.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Some of it I need closer by. Some of it I need access to faster. Right? Some of it I need more reliable or what have you. And then I want to be able to offload, onload, right? But still have access.
Yeah.
And that's the world we live in today, which is a perfect world for MinIO.
Yeah.
Right? MinIO is the perfect solution for that world.
Yeah. The origin of MinIO was actually centered around the point you mentioned that data is going to be everywhere. This was the reason, right? If you look at MinIO, it's even AWS S3 compatible. If there is already AWS S3, there was no point for MinIO, right? If all of the world's data was inside AWS, then I myself would recommend AWS S3, right? We saw that bulk of the world's data is actually outside AWS. Data is getting produced all over the globe, and I cannot imagine all the data will be produced inside AWS. It's just not possible, right? And if that's the case, then what would the industry do if each one of the cloud, even till today, they're incompatible. Azure Blob is incompatible with Google Cloud Storage is incompatible with S3. Outside the public cloud, all the SAN, NAS, HDFS was so fragmented, and it's impossible to build applications taking care of all these API, and the data will continue to be produced everywhere. And then there are bigger problems for the data. The cost part, that cloud is pretty good when you are going from enterprise IT, like people cost is very expensive. You go to the cloud, and overall that speed of innovation, the productivity, it's better. But then as you scale, once you build the DevOps culture, then you will see that cloud is like staying in a hotel for a very long time. When you can lease an apartment or buy a home, that's where even like at scale, I have seen customers of Minayo moving from the cloud to Equinix like colos, because they now can take Minayo on Kubernetes and level the ground, and they can buy machines on lease basis on Equinix data centers. And I've seen that like at scale, customers do that too. Other customers, they want productivity, and they just go multi-cloud, go to whichever infrastructure gives you better deal. But overall, the most important point you mentioned is that the cost part, it only makes sense if cost of storing is a tiny fraction of the business, right? If I'm putting a computer in my retail store and now hiring computer experts, and computer is more expensive than the profit I make, it makes no business sense, right? When computers used to be expensive. Today, you see in the retail business, people are reporting to machines. Machines make all the decisions of your retail business. And that has to happen in the data infrastructure. And this is one of the reasons for Minayo's success. Not only giving them the control, it kind of democratized it, that you can, like most of the time they find that at the cost of just few months that they've been on the cloud, they can actually pay for the whole infrastructure, and they pick these machines, buy these machines on a lease basis, and load Minayo and Kubernetes. They're completely in control. This is another reason for Minayo's success too. By driving down the cost of data infrastructure, now data starts to work for your business.
Love it. AB, beyond Snowflake, have any, and look, there's a reason why Snowflake's a market leader, right? They recognize this and they're moving. Any other companies partnering with Minayo on a similar sort of initiative?
We have seen starting from the Spark type workloads, Databricks is Spark, right? We have seen that to be quite popular. There are two forms of databases we are seeing. One is that basically the query engines that on Spark and other platforms, like even from Presto to all these like TrinoDB, all of them, they are basically distributed query engines processing on the data. They have always embraced object store. The ones that like SQL Server to Teradata to Vertica to the ones that data warehouse solutions, they started moving in fast into this market. I was actually quite surprised at the speed at which they moved. The one that I'm excited after Snowflake, the one that I'm excited big is the Microsoft SQL Server. Surprisingly, they actually play a big role in the big data analytics. The customers actually don't want to be writing their own Hadoop MapReduce functions. They don't have the skills to operate Hadoop scale, right? They actually, all they want is give me a SQL prompt on your data. And the data can be 10 GB or 10 petabytes. I don't care. I just want to type SQL query, and I don't care how underlying systems work. The data warehouse is coming back in a different form. This time it's better scale at a fraction of cost.
Absolutely.
But that's a great point. I want to give you one thing. We all, as an industry, we have shiny trinket syndrome. Whatever's the latest and greatest has to be the best, and we can't wait to have it, and we pay money for it, and it's like stars in our eyes. But we lose sight. There's a lot of people that use Microsoft SQL Server. There's a lot of people that use DB too. There's all of the legacy databases. Yeah. It's not all Tiger Graph database, and it's not all time series or even Minayo, frankly, in terms of storage. There's a lot of different legacy systems out in the world. I just want to have, if you listen to us on Techstrong TV, you'd think everyone has everything in the cloud. It's not the case. It's not the case.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Just emphasize. But go ahead, keep going.
Yeah. No, the database market will continue to be fragmented like this because not all data is equal, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
But one problem is that scale, I can no longer organize them. I don't know which data is important, which data needs to be fast, and which data needs to be slow. They just want everything to be online all the time. That's where they put all the data on object store, but then by converging onto one universal format, or at least few popular formats as the master data repository, now the databases are transforming themselves into query engines. Historically, databases were query language, query computation, and the storage system, right? The backend, how the data got indexed and organized, all of this was part of the database. But as database scaled to address petabytes of data, they realized that focus on query language and query computation and the data, but keep the data in universal format. That way, different databases can coexist. Right. And because each of them solve a specific set of problems. Graph data, you mentioned Tiger Graph, Neo4j, a bunch of them, right? Then if there is key value store, there is Cassandra now, even Cassandra went through rewrite to be object native. That's called AstroDB. Then Postgres modern version, there is NeonDB. Everybody is getting rewritten to go cloud native and built on object store. But the fact here is that they are all their focus is turning towards query engine. And then the storage part is coming to object store. And when it comes to object store, if they all converge on universal format, then each of them can solve a subset of the problem. It is impossible to solve all, if Swiss Army knife approach that one database can solve it all. They did try multi-model databases, but it's actually really putting different kinds of database into one. That's a hard problem. Right? You are better off picking one data infrastructure like object store and S3 API is obviously now the industry standard, and universal formats. And even there may be few, right? Like Iceberg is evolving, compressed CSV and JSON are still there. As long as they are universally recognized, keep the data in one format and then bring different query engines to process them. And these databases are going cloud native, they are containerized, and they can be scaled elastically. As an advantage of this, you can now have part of your data processed by Databricks, take that data, feed it to BigQuery, take other output of that, feed it to Snowflake. This was impossible just 2 years before. Today, it is a reality, and it's must have. If not, you will be vendor locked into one particular solution, and it will not be the solution for all kinds of problems.
And it may not be hyperscale either, but hey, AB, this was the longest 15-minute interview I've done in a while. I think we're at 30 minutes. But anyway, I want to thank you for coming on. And, obviously, this is a great topic for me. I love to talk about this. Just a reminder, talking about this topic, we August 10th, so I'm not sure when you're watching this, but if it's not August 10th in your world, we are doing a virtual event on Cloud Native, and we will be discussing a lot of the topics. Not so in the great way that AB has done here, but we'll be discussing a lot of cloud native. August 10th, check it out. You can probably get to it at techstrongevents.com and check out our cloud native. AB, I want to thank you for coming on. Don't wait 6 months to come back. Keep us posted, and best of luck with Min.io.
I love to be here. I'm going to be back soon.
Great, man. All right. Min.io, that's min.io, min.io. You can check them out. We're going to take a break on Techstrong. We'll be right back.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, welcome to Techstrong TV. I am really happy to have he's not old, but a friend I've known for a long time, and he's now with a new company, and it's the first time we're going to have him on here on Techstrong and with the new company. Let me introduce you, first of all, to my friend Lawrence Pinnegree. Lawrence, welcome to Techstrong. Joining Lawrence and I today, I want to introduce you to Robert Slapnick, Bob Slapnick. He's the COO and co-founder of Brazen Cloud. And Bob, welcome to Techstrong TV. Nice to have you on here. So,
Thank you.
Lawrence, we're going to, I'm going to point to you, Lawrence. Why don't, I mentioned I knew you a while. Why don't you tell people a little bit about your story
Sure.
and then a little bit about how you came to come to the company here?
Sure. Well, so I spent 14 years roughly as an analyst or MVP, managing VP at Gartner. I worked with product managers, product marketing folks, go-to-market strategists, CEOs over the years. And I, myself and my team, we looked at what was emerging tech coming along. And I came across a company that I thought had really instrumental tech. And the way I look at it is, there's inflection points that arrive in the market, right? You had Splunk with analytics. That was a huge, change in the way that we look at logs. I saw this opportunity and Brazen Cloud as another inflection point on the endpoint and on the workload side. And because ultimately what Splunk or those folks did is they created a Swiss Army knife for logs, right? What Brazen Cloud brings to market is kind of a Swiss Army knife for automations on the workload. And so, that's what drove me to this product. But it's also, when you can do so many things like Brazen Cloud can do, there's also a challenge with that. And that is, how do you position such a broad, amazing platform that with capabilities to automate everywhere? And so that's what sort of drove me to join Brazen Cloud. I'm excited about our future. And I wanted to come to the show today to talk about what I think is needed in the security industry. And one of the things I think is key is I think general purpose automation needs to be brought to the security market. And I'm not talking about just SOAR products, which automate in the SOC. I think that we need to go broader with general automation. I think we need to build to, activities that are not only just in the SOC, but also in engineering, in the cloud, and other areas of security where we can automate tasks and make people more efficient.
Absolutely. Well, look, Lawrence, as you know, I started DevOps.com about 8 years ago. One of the things that attracted me to the whole DevOps movement was the idea that we can get sort of another bite at the apple in security to correct some mistakes that were made early on in the security world that we're still paying the price for. The whole shift left thing and all of that. But here's the facts that we've learned, through 20 years of Agile and now, 10 years, 9 years of DevOps, is that technology in general is moving towards automation.
Yeah.
And automation to the point that it's happening so fast, humans can't keep up. Anytime we put a human in the mix, it almost by definition slows it down.
Yeah.
Right. So it's for a lot of what we see going on in the software world today. It's automate or die.
Right.
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 And I think it's very true for security. Now, look, some of our security friends may disagree with that. Right. They have to have that security person in the middle. I get it. But if you're not automating today, you're not going to keep up with the pace of software deployment.
Right. I mean, the reality, even if you look at, folks like, my former employer, analyst firms, even the media, we all are having trouble keeping up because you have the pace of, drag and drop interfaces to build applications. You have, the landscape of cloud making things faster, more agile. I actually think that well, this might be controversial, but I actually think that we need to recognize we've been automating a long time. In fact, it's been a long time since anyone's had to really do mass malware analysis on every workload, right? We use scanners for that. That's automation. What I would actually contest is that we automate a lot, but we don't focus on the corporate automation from a general sense. We don't look at it and go, hey, how can we be more efficient through automation? we actually use tons of automation. If you can use almost every vendor as an example of this. I mean, all of the major competitors, they offer automation, but what they do is they offer only automation in one use case, right? Or two use cases, or maybe as much as five. But at the end of the day, we shouldn't be scared of this. I mean, we've been using malware scanners and EDR and other tools with automation for a long time. What I think we need to focus on is things that are disruptive to our manual procedures, right? We do far too much with manual procedures. And I'll give you an example. I know that when Log4j came out, that I have friends that had to, instantly go in and try to create scripts in their environment, figure out, ways
Where
to
it was.
where it was and all of that. And that's a great example of where you can target automation in a way that gives you an edge in security, right? And I don't think that, if I may for a moment postulate that SOAR products really haven't delivered on the automation that we really need, and the scale in which we need it.
Well,
right?
but let's be fair. SOAR wasn't meant as a general automation tool. It's
Right.
part of being a grown-up adult is you realize using the right tool for the right job is a godsend, right? It's all about the tool.
Yep.
SOAR wasn't meant to be it does what it's supposed to do in a very narrow sense.
Right.
But Lawrence, really one of the things we haven't mentioned, but it really is driving all of this, is we're drowning in data. We're drowning in information. We're almost drowning in metrics.
Yep.
You and I come from a world, and Bob, I bet you too, where we were taught everything could be measured, and we measure everything.
Yep.
And damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. Let's gather all the info we can to analyze it.
Yep.
Well, now we're at a point, especially in security, where we have so much goddamn data to analyze. We have so much metrics and logs and everything. How's a human going to go through that?
Exactly, and they can't. I mean, to your point, I sat in a multi-billion-dollar company looking at 1,000 alerts an hour and having to triage each. And just think about that. I've got 60 minutes in an hour doing 1,000 alerts. It's humanly impossible to do. Well,
Yeah.
You can review it, but you really can't do much about it.
You're not doing justice to it,
Right.
that's for sure.
Right. And then there's automation that we need that, where we're trying to make investigations faster, or, we're trying to do triage, or we're trying to do a deeper investigation than what I would call the OSINT kind of, layer of things. There's a lot of additional data that we still don't enrich in the SOC, that investigators have to do third level triage, right? And so, I think we're inundated with data that sometimes is meaningless. Machine learning has helped refine some of the scoring, some of the modeling, but actually, in a lot of cases, machine learning has created even more data for us, right? So, now it's not we know this one thing happened and it's bad. Now it's, well, we think it might be bad. You should look at it and then investigate. And that creates a whole series of activities that I think, need deeper automation. And beyond just the SOAR, SOC triage type activities that we do today. And I also think that SOAR needs to be a little bit more affordable too. It's an expensive add-on.
Well, yeah. I mean, but look, I remember it was probably you making the same argument about SIMs.
Yeah.
10 years ago, right?
Yep.
12 years ago.
Yeah.
It's expensive, and hopefully it comes down. Let's talk about Brazen Cloud. How does it help with this?
What Brazen Cloud is a security orchestrator that provides the framework and the ability to automate across any workload. So we do use an agent service. It can function as it can execute tasks within a workload, or it can also execute things like scripts, PowerShell, Python, laterally in the environment. If you wanted to call APIs and gather data, and we can run what we call runbooks. So in the SOC or in the SOAR realm, people call it a playbook. We call it a run book because we're about end-to-end automating, right? We're not about let's insert, humans more into every process and require more workflow. What we're about is you have a specific problem. Let's say I want to hunt the entire environment. You go in, configure a run book, and you push the run book out to go do that activity, right? Let's say I want to, do some troubleshooting on every host. I can instrument that in a run book, hit go, and instantly get data back from my environment. And this is the power of our platform, is the ability to kind of take all of the major human activities, not the stuff that's really very, clearly automatable, but something that where, why am I doing this function over and over again and going out to systems and logging and cutting, pasting, and all these other activities? Those can be consolidated into a run book. And so that users and administrators, investigators, SOC professionals go directly to our platform, click a few buttons, run a run book, and get the data that they need, right? So if I'm doing an investigation, I can instrument Brazen Cloud with binaries that I need to use for that investigation, whether it be doing a forensic capture, doing a threat hunt, evaluating, with API calls to some other, service offering for enrichment. All of these things are possible under our platform. The second major benefit to our platform is we can do pinhole connectivity between workloads. And what that means is you can create during the process of an automation. Let's say that you want to move forensic data around, okay, and you want to remove it from a DMZ where you're doing your analysis to some other location. We can do that directly over our it's an SSL session, but we can create pinholes for the duration of the process to execute in that run book and close the connectivity. So we're not actually having to, go out and create a workflow, go out and execute and wait for humans to go make changes in let's say DMZ environments or firewalls or VPN architectures. And we're not pinning up connectivity, on a continuous basis, leaving more holes for the environment to be exploited in. So what we can do is we can create connectivity, let's say move files or transact, execute the process and close it down. So we're calling it kind of a zero trust, kind of pinholes that we can create between applications.
Lawrence, I apologize, but we've got people in the waiting room. We're going to need to close loops here.
No
For
worries.
people who want to get more information, where can they go?
They can go to brazencloud.com and
If you wouldn't mind, it's BRAZEN
brazencloud.com.
SLOUD.com.
Correct.
And is there a trial? How do they get started?
Yeah, they're welcome to request a trial on the website. We'll send them a demo count. We'd be happy to get them into the platform and automating as soon as they would like to.
Love it. Hey, man, I apologize that we're a little shorter today.
No.
My fault.
No, thank you very much for your time.
But we look forward to having you back on. Bob, thanks for joining us. We're going to take a break here on Techstrong TV.
Thank you, sir. Take care.
Be well.
You too.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Techstrong TV. We've got another great segment lined up for you. I have some friends from Sysdig who are joining us. We have Anna Bellick, who's been on the show before. Anna, welcome. It's good to see you again.
To be here.
And actually, I'm going to ask you to more fully introduce yourself, Anna. But before we do, I wanted to also introduce the audience to Daniela Ponce. And I think, Daniela, this is your first time on Techstrong TV, isn't it?
It is. And thank you. I'm very glad to be here.
Thanks for being here. We're happy to have you here. So, Daniela, since you are a first-timer, I'm going to ask you to go first and just kind of introduce yourself to our audience.
Okay, so Daniela Ponce, and I'm part of the Sysdig Secure product marketing team.
Excellent. And thank you. And Anna, if you don't mind, just a quick introduction to our audience.
Sure, Ellen. Very happy to be back here. My name is Anna. I am the Director of Thought Leadership at SysDig and a former Gartner analyst.
Excellent. And Anna, look, being that you are not the rookie here, I'm going to task you, if it's okay with maybe, look, a lot of our audience is very familiar with SysDig, but there may be some who aren't or are not sure. So why don't you give them a little background about SysDig?
Yeah, I think my shortest version is that SysDig is a cloud and container security company. Specifically, we help you secure your cloud native applications from source to run. So that means we help you make sure that you don't ship things that are flawed, and we also help you make sure that the beautiful things that you ship continue to do well once they're running. And if something weird happens, we let you know as soon as possible.
Absolutely. Very cool. All right. So we want to talk some crypto jacking today, huh? And before we get into what SysDig is doing about it, I feel like we need to define crypto jacking, right? Look, you know, it's funny. I had some team members in this week, a little younger than me. They're all younger than me. But I had some and I happened to walk in the office, and they're all in there with their crypto things, you know, looking at their crypto, whatever it is one looks at when you have crypto. I'm not a crypto person. But who wants to define kind of crypto jacking for purposes of our discussion today?
So I can do that. Cryptocurrency, for those who are not familiar, you could read entire lectures on it, but basically it's an alternate form of currency. The probably most well-known ones are Bitcoin and Ethereum. And the idea is that you mine this currency by running processes on a machine. Can be either CPU or GPU. And cryptojacking is when you run that process on someone else's machine that you are not authorized to use, thereby using their compute resources, electricity, what have you, to generate money for yourself.
Let me, if you don't mind, and I'm just going to expand a little bit on it. Look, a Bitcoin, a single Bitcoin or a single Ethereum coin, you know, there are exchanges that set the value of these things. But some of the whole underlying system, if you will, the validity of the system is based on the blockchain that underlies the currency or the coin or whatever you want to call it. And the people who started, or the person, depending who you believe, that started Bitcoin, you know, had this ingenious idea that the coins could be validated through what we call mining, which means intense computing power to try to, you know, get the, not break the blockchain, but, you know, figure out those numbers. And and one can actually mine coins this way, right? One can actually gather coins. And Bitcoin, look at its height, what was it, 50, 60,000? Maybe it's down to 20, I don't remember now. But think about that. So in addition to just having dollars or rubles or whatever to buy Bitcoin, you could mine, getting enough computing power to mine these coins if you figured it out. Now, getting enough computing power far exceeds what we can do, you know, on my laptop here usually. And so much like what we used for SETI, if for those who are of an age and remember Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, we kind of crowdsourced and used CPUs across many different people looking for patterns in signals from space, or a more sinister zombie machines that we were using for DDoS attacks, right? We would take over, the bad guys would take over these bad machines and use their CPUs and machines to launch an attack. Very similar kind of thing with Bitcoin mining, right? Crypto mining. We don't have to call it Bitcoin mining. It's crypto mining, right? If we take over these machines and use their CPUs to give us the horsepower we need to mine, we can really get coins. So we can, you know, try to get coins. And of course, not everybody wants to give you their machine to use. So this whole crypto jacking industry has popped up, where we take over machines to use them, as Anna said, to mine for these coins. I don't hold myself out to be an expert. That was a very layman's description, but I hope it did the trick here for people.
Yeah, I mean, you're in the right department for sure. I'll add a couple things. One is that while Bitcoin and Ethereum are the most prevalent and probably most credible, I'll say, coins, the ones that are often mined by cryptojackers are actually the ones that are more privacy focused. So one of the key elements of the blockchain is that your transactions are private and they're all traceable. So nobody knows who exactly owns things, but everyone knows, but it's possible to find out exactly what happened. So to your point about trying to steal compute power, and to your point about giving it up voluntarily, I think folding it home is another example where you could like run something on your PlayStation to help the protein folding scientists figure stuff out. This is much different, but now we also have access to this infinite pool of compute power in the public cloud, right? So if you are wanting to do this non-maliciously, like you just wanted to mine some coins, you could theoretically go into Google or AWS and spun up some instances and do that. It turns out to not be worth it because the cost of the compute power is much greater than the money you are likely to generate. But if you're stealing someone else's Google Cloud instances, then it's free to you and it costs them money, but you get coins. So if the coins end up worth something, this is very lucrative for the attacker. And because of the privacy features of the blockchain, and because it's pretty easy to find open compute instances, it's actually a very low risk proposition for the attacker as well, which results in cryptojacking being at the moment the most prevalent type of cloud attack that is out there, because it's just a great ROI for the malicious actors.
So is it that easy to jack?
I mean, are
As
there
it
so many?
turns out, it's fairly easy. So you can go, Sysdig has a threat research team, which spends a lot of time looking into this stuff, and they actually will set up instances for people to hijack to see how they do it. But you can also go out and you can read about it, and there are lots of kits available that you can just download that literally will like step-by-step walk you through how to do this. So almost anybody with a computer can try. It's harder to make a lot of money because it gets into more complex attack patterns. Like you may need to steal credentials to actually be able to create new instances rather than, for example, stealing from existing ones. But in general, almost any like teenager with a computer can try this. The actors that collect the most money tend to be a little more sophisticated, but none of them are like incredibly advanced folks, as far as we can tell.
So you look, I'm in security a long time. So do you think we're still at the kiddie scripter stage on this, or do you think there's more organized, nefarious actors at play here?
It's hard to tell exactly, but I would, if I had to guess, I would say that it's more script kiddies than, advanced persistent threats. Advanced persistent threats tend to go toward higher value targets. Like they're not just scraping coins, they're interested in stealing data or maybe extortion or something like that. So my suspicion is the vast majority of cryptojackers are actually just opportunistic kinds of attackers.
So I thought I had read somewhere that there was one nation state, maybe it was North Korea, that was, if you want to call them a script kiddie, I'm not going to argue with you, but...
Plead the fifth on that one.
Right. But anyway, so let's talk about how big a problem is this. Daniela, do you have any insight into, how prevalent, how big, I don't know how you would even measure it, by dollars, jacked, by people, I don't know.
So it is becoming a real threat in terms of the prevalence. Yeah. So Google released a report saying that among the attacks that they have seen in compromised machines, 86% is cryptojackers, and there is a tendency to actually shift to cryptojacking exactly because it's easy and immediate kind of monetization. You don't need to chase for ransom or be chased by, law enforcement now as well. They are not traceable. So there is good incentives for cryptojacking. And also, as Anna said, you don't need much. They are offered as a service as well. So you can start really easy.
Yeah. Low barrier of entry, as we say, in the business world.
Exactly. And once you are there, you start mining, you become part of a pool. Yeah. So whatever you do as a contribution to the final mining, when they get the commission, you get a part of it. So you don't have to go chasing the money comes to you.
Crazy, huh? Who would have thought of, think that if you had to tell your grandma or grandpa or someone from 100 years ago that, this is going to be a problem, how would you even explain this, right? It would be so, wow. But that's the world we live in. So what can we do? How can Sysdig help us?
So there are many ways that you can detect crypto miners. Yeah, you can detect from things that we have been observing in the market, some kind of indicators of compromise. But you can also use machine learning in a very focused way, because machine learning is very good for things that you want to make sure that you capture when it happens in its variation as well. So crypto miners, they have been used based on kits out there, and the variations that are coming to market, they are, vast. And so a machine learning that understands the anatomy of a crypto miner is a good way to detect their presence. And the sooner you detect their presence, the easier you are. Or I would say that the less impact you have, both financially and also in terms of reputation, because they can run up your bill, up to hundreds of thousands in 1 month. They use stealthy kind of tactics to stay undetected or non-detected until you start noticing, degradation in your application or your bills, becoming completely out of control. And also, if you detect them early, you avoid what is called multi-stage attacks or attacks with multiple types of downloads. And once they are in your environment, why not, put other things there? Why not move laterally? Why not, launch a ransom attack as well? So,
this feeds into the whole ecosystem of the bad guy, I call it Evil Inc. The whole ecosystem of Evil Inc. today, right? Where, the crypto jackers don't exist in a vacuum. Anna, to your point, they may be relatively innocuous, low-level kind of bad guys in the hierarchy. But nevertheless, there's a whole ecosystem of these bad folks, of Evil Inc., right? And once they have an in, look, they're looking to make money. They can't make enough money crypto mining or jacking or whatever. They know enough to pass along that access to the next level of Evil Inc., who are going to come in and maybe find another way to make money off of your assets and information. And then maybe it's the ransomware people, and maybe it's, depending who you are, it can get all the way up to nation states and what have you. So, even the smallest, relatively innocent, and I don't want to, here's a mistake I think we make though. Let's not call crypto jacking innocent. It's wrong, it's illegal. It's theft, right? Yeah. They may not be, stealing your nuclear codes or waging thermonuclear war or whatever, but they're nevertheless thieves and bad, and they're part of this bigger ecosystem of bad.
And, to your point, if somebody becomes a target of cryptojacking, it's sort of a signal to how easy it is to compromise your system, right? So even though I may have just discovered that I can run this miner on your machine for 5 minutes, that means you're not protecting yourself very well. So I could sell that information to somebody who may be more vicious and wants to do something more serious, especially if I know something about you, like, oh, you're a financial institution, that's delicious. Right. So there's a whole array of potential consequences just because you're exposing yourself as not a very secure organization.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Everything has value this day. Absolutely.
Yep. So Sysdig, how's Sysdig helping me?
So we are coming to market with this machine-based approach to detect cryptojackers. And it is a focused kind of solution because machine learning, as it came to market, usually it's to detect anomalies. But anomalies leaves a very large margin for false positives. You still have that job to analyze what that anomaly is about. And time is of essence here. We want to be very targeted in terms of we detect crypto miners in there as soon as possible, and we give you high precision about, this is a crypto miner. Please do what you need to do to stop it, because from that point on, it's going to be hefty bills and also more exposure to threats. So we come to market with a very effective way to put a layer of defense against cryptojackers in their variation, because it's hard to track them as a single or a small set or a set of indicators. You really need to understand their behavior.
Yeah. I mean, I recognizing the pattern, recognizing the problem there. Now, once Sysdig alerts you to this, what do we do next, Anna?
So you have the option, as with any Sysdig rule or method, you have the option to use it in a blocking fashion or an alerting fashion. So you can, if you see a miner, always block it. Or you can send an alert to the dashboard and then your team can deal with it as need be. There's another, actually, I think, pretty interesting element here that's sort of unique to ML. So as you might know, machine learning is a probabilistic type of approach. So what actually happens is the model will say with very high precision that like, we are 99% sure this is a minor, right? Or we're 95% sure this is a minor. And we set some threshold where we say like, okay, well, if it's more than X percent, then we're going to block it, or then we're going to give you the option to block it. But in our case, what's different is the user has control over the model threshold. So if you want to say that you want to block only things over 99% and alert on things over 90%, you theoretically could do that. Which is quite unusual. Normally, machine learning models can't be tuned very well. They're just kind of set for you.
Absolutely. Guys, I got to wrap. We're running at it. This was a long 15-minute interview, but we got a lot to cover. Daniela, for people who want to get more Sysdig info on stopping cryptojacking, where could they go?
They go to our website. We have plenty of resources about, how we do it and what we can offer to our customers in terms of use cases we help them with.
And that's sysdig.com.
And yes,
SYSDIG.
Yeah, thank you.
Ladies, thank you so much for joining us on Techstrong. Hey, stop cryptojacking in its tracks. It's not a joke. It's crime, and don't be a victim. We're going to take a break here on Techstrong. We'll be right back.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more.
This is Techstrong TV.
All right, welcome back to Techstrong TV live at RSA Conference here in San Francisco. So very excited to be back in person, and we are filling up this hall, and there's a lot of people here, and I'm having so many great conversations. And with me now is Nikhil Gupta, who is the CEO and co-founder over at Armor Code. Nikhil, thank you so much for joining me today. I do appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So we actually just talked not too long ago about an event that we hosted for you guys, a virtual event called AppSecCon. What a great event that was. You guys brought together some of the best folks in the application security space for the event. And by all points, it was a success. So lots of great conversations happening there. But I want to kind of hear from you what you guys are seeing in the application security space. But before we do that, I don't know if you want to let us know all about Armor Code for those people who might not be familiar with you.
Sure. So for those who doesn't know Armor Code is building the AppSecOps platform of choice. While application development has transformed a lot, from monolithic to microservices, waterfall to agile, and plethora of use of open source, application security has been painful and not scalable. So, for every application, you need at least over a dozen tools, SES, ASP, like whole bunch of the tools, and you generate a lot of false positive. Number two, these tools outputs are not talking to each other. You put it into Excel sheet, so you're living in Excel hell. And, we have like application security, operations, and engineering team. These are three opposite organizations with oppositely aligned interest. And last but not the least, there's one AppSec engineer to 100 developers. So that makes it even more difficult. So basically, Armor Code AppSecOps platform provides four things. One is the application security posture management. It gives you a complete 360-degree view of your applications, your security posture and all. Second thing is the universal vulnerability management, because you don't need a vulnerability management and a DevSecOps platform. So while you are getting information for our AppSecs, you can also get it from the infrastructure and you can prioritize them. Third thing is the DevSecOps automation and orchestration, because everybody wants to do it. When you're releasing once a day or several times a day, you need automation. And last but not the least, when the software is changing so fast, you need to have continuous compliance. So Armor Code AppSecOps platform gives a complete solution for all these needs.
That's great. So do you guys have any announcements here at the show?
Absolutely. So we actually very recently did, and I'll briefly talk about the AppSecOn conference. Sure. And thanks for helping us with that. That was the world's largest digital application security conference. In the very first conference, we have more than 2,200 registrations. And for those who arranges these registrations, how difficult it is to attract people, and we got a 4.7 out of 5 rating. And we had some very good key speakers like Phil Venables, Bashar, and a lot of those people showed up. And in fact, we were offering CPE credit, so a lot of people benefited from that.
Oh, great.
So that conference was great. At the same time, we also announced our application security survey, State of AppSec survey results. And the number one challenge why application security is not being done is because of the challenge of hiring people. And so as a result, we are constantly listening to our customers and the industries. So number one announcement is a no code automation. So for instance, like SolarWinds happened in December 2020. So Log4j happened in December 2021, and it's a matter of time, and people are expecting what will come next. It's not if, it's what will come in 2022. So you need to automate that. So AppSecOps platform, we have no-code automation. You can entire runbook to simplify that operations. Number two, here we have customers have been complaining there's a lots of data, but there's no visibility. So we are announcing that we have touched 110 plus integrations. So those of you who don't know, like government companies will take 2 or 3 integrations in like a quarter or so. We have done 110 plus integrations. So not only we are covering application security tools integrations, cloud security, posture management configurations, and container configurations. And then the third thing, which is very painful for the customers, is there's a friction between the developer and the security people. And as a result, we have launched a knowledge-based product, basically, which is a key capabilities where the developers don't have to go and search about it on the internet and get some spurious codes over there. They can leverage from what their past predecessors have done. So these are the 3 key announcements, and we are super excited about that.
Yeah, wow, that's really beneficial on so many levels. What you guys are adding to the platform, and especially with visibility is a huge issue these days. So the fact that you guys are addressing that as well is very, very, very cool, I think. So let's talk a little bit about this AppSecCon event. As part of that, you guys introduced us to the Purple Book community. So tell me a little bit about Purple Book and what it aims to do.
Yeah, so Purple Book community is a security of the security people by the security people. So a couple of years ago, when I was starting Armor Code, one thing which I realized that application security, product security, or software security, it's bigger than any individual company, right? So it's bigger than Armor Code and all, and it needs a community to solve this problem. It's not an individual problem. So we brought a bunch of security leaders like Sean and others who are from various Fortune 50, Fortune 500 companies, and it's like an area where people come in, they talk twice a month, and in fact, we are launching 10 new chapters of Purple Book Community. So,
Wow.
so exactly. So we started with the local Bay Area chapter, and in fact, we are kind of going to go international. We are looking to open in India, Australia, New Zealand, Europe, Middle East. So that you can see that how much excitement is there and how much value people are deriving. So it was started as a community of just 30 people. We launched a book, Purple Book, which actually just got released also at AppSecCon. And so it's an open source book. People can go and learn the contents and everything else. So first things first is people need to educate themselves, and application security is so new that you cannot go to a university and kind of learn it over there.
Right.
So the best people are to teach are also the security leaders. So that's where the few of us got together and we are sharing that content. And that's what people are really liking it. Part of that offshoot was an application security conference, AppSecCon, because people realized that, hey, there is no, like, of course, we have a RSA, but it's RSA for security for everything. But there was no focus conference, if you will, for application security. So that is what we kind of got together with that. And so in Purple Book, again, so it's now become a movement because we have thousands of people up showing for the AppSecCon. And now we are getting inbound from all over the world, literally all over the world. People we want to bring this community to our local thing so that other people can benefit.
That's great. That's great. Love to hear groundswell opportunities like that, and just raising the collective profile of application security is certainly something that the Purple Book community is very much doing. And I expect great things from the Purple Book community moving forward. And Armor Code as kind of the steward of that, you guys are doing great things as well. Great news on the new features that you guys have announced here at RSA. So many good things happening with you. So what's next for Armor Code?
So Armor Code, we had a big vision when we started. We have a solid based platform as we speak. And now the platform is ready and we are just constantly listening to customers are adding. We had a phenomenal year of sales. So we had our first year of sales end of March. And we kind of quote unquote, we are here to set records. We set a record. We create a very good revenue over there. We signed one Big Four as a customer who's offering MSSP services on top of our platform. And now it's just growth, right? So all I say is build and sell, if you will, when it comes to the company, right? Build the product and sell the product. And of course, give back through the community.
Great. Well, Nikhil, thank you so much for stopping by, telling us what's going on with Armor Code. And it's great to see you in person, live and in person.
Absolutely. I'm so glad. And thanks for having me again.
Great. Yes, absolutely. All right.
Thank you.
All right, everybody. We've got lots more Techstrong TV interviews coming on up here at RSA Conference live in San Francisco. So please do stay tuned. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
Hey everyone, happy Tuesday. Cody J. Brown here with some upcoming programs from Techstrong Learning. So first up on Wednesday, August 17th at 1 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com, SciCode presents Code Tampering, 4 Keys to Pipeline Integration. This program will present you with a 4-pillar approach to reduce code tampering risk. Following day on Thursday, August 18th at 11 a.m. Eastern, we are joined by panelists from PlanView who will discuss the must-have integration capabilities that your organization needs to measure, maximize, and communicate a return on your investment. And right after that at 1 p.m. Eastern, in conjunction with AWS and Rafe Systems, Container Journal brings you a workshop titled Optimized Multi-Cluster Lifecycle Management with Rafe Kubernetes Operations Platform. This workshop will guide you through common Kubernetes operations challenges and demonstrate how Rafe simplifies your multi-cluster lifecycle journey to modernization with AWS. So that's all I've got for you today, but we do have plenty of upcoming and on-demand programs coming up for you here at Techstrong Learning.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond, CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
Well, thank you for joining us for another CISO Talk episode. We have a great topic today. We're talking about communications with some communications experts. So my name is Mitch Ashley. I'm CTO with Techstrong Group and also work with the research part of our organization. And I host our CISO Talk show. And this is part of a masterclass series that we're doing. It's actually episode 5, and we talk about a number of topics. So please check those out. And we have a live event coming, online virtual event coming up that we'll tell you about at the end with lots of good stuff in it. So let's get right to our topic. But I first want to start by having our panel introduce themselves. I say panel. These are two friends, colleagues. We've worked together.
We're a panel. It's a panel. We're paneling.
It's a panel of friends.
Yeah. If it's a friends, isn't like a gaggle instead of a panel? I don't know what you call it when it's friends, but it's still a panel, I guess. All righty. Well, anyway, so Jen Leggio, great to have you on. Introduce yourself if you would.
Well, I'm Jen Leggio. I've been in security marketing communications for about 20 years now. Currently CMO of a company called Netography, which I absolutely love. And I'm just really honored to be here with this gaggle of friends to talk about communications.
Okay, the term is stuck. Thank you.
Branding.
Branding, exactly. Talking to the expert. Okay, Mr. Rothman, my colleague with Techstrong Research.
Yeah, so Mike Rothman, I am Chief Strategy Officer of Techstrong Group and GM of Techstrong Research and general gadfly. And this topic is actually one that is near and dear to my heart. I've been talking about this for 15-ish years from a published standpoint. A big part of my book, The Pragmatic CSO, was all about communication at a senior level. So yeah, I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to see Jennifer. It has been way too long. I missed RSA. I didn't get COVID, so that's a plus, but I did not see a lot of the people that I have not seen in a long, long time, and I miss them terribly. So it's not quite the same, but a Zoom box will do for at least the next 35 or 40 minutes.
Exactly. And we have some, by the way, we have some construction going on, and I'll let you guess whose site it is. But anyway, if you hear some knocking.
It could be any of us. We're not going to point any fingers.
It's not a piston in our engines of our back room of production. It's, some construction person upstairs. So, Mike, I'd love for you to say, tell us a little bit about your book, because I remember when the Pragmatic CISO came out, or CSO came out. And that, I don't remember if there was any other books targeted at a CSO role at that time. I think it was one of the first, wasn't it?
It was. So this was in 2007. I mean, it's actually painful to say that and then do the math and go, wow, I've been doing this for a long time. But really, it originated because I had a number of folks who would approach me and basically say, I've been thrust into this situation where I have to address the board. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm managing a team. I don't know what I'm doing. There are all these other aspects of this job. I don't know what I'm doing. So I tried to write a little guide for folks that are kind of thrust into a management position for the first time, thrust into a position where they have to start selling the benefits of their security program, thrust into a position where they are accountable to the board and the audit committee, and what does that mean, and really provide a structure for how you do that. But the thing underlying all of that is communication and collaboration, right? You security folks cannot exist on their own. We're part of the team. If anything, we're a service organization, and the rest of the team, we've got to meet our mission, right, which is to protect the critical data of the organization, but we have to do that in tandem right, working hand in hand with the rest of the organization, or it doesn't work. And this was back in 2007, right? Things have gotten a lot more complicated since then. We're doing things a lot faster. We've got everything that's in the cloud. Cloud was like hardly even a thing back then, right? You know, it was like a time sharing thing. Like, oh, the cloud, right? CompuServe, right? You know, all right, not quite CompuServe, but you know, so our life is just a lot more complicated, significantly different than it was. But a lot of those core constructs are the same, which is your cube is a dangerous place to spend the day if you're a senior security professional, right? You've got to get out and talk to folks. You've got to get out and really sell the auspian and kind of the advantages of your security program. You've got to work with your team. You've got to work with senior managers. So, you know, it's just interesting to see a lot of these things, you know, come back around after a long time when we're like, oh my God, APT, right? Or, oh my God, you know, EDR, and we got to do this now. It's XDR and all that other stuff. But
whatever
at the end of the day, a lot of what we're doing is consistent, right? It needs to be, because, you know, that's how we are successful as leaders.
You know, Jen, we actually just had an episode talking about incident response and putting plans together. And of course, communications is a huge part of it, not telling you what you don't know. There's the formal communications. And of course, you have an extremely big role in that as well. There's also the internal communications. We're way past the days, you know, Mike's referring to of, oh, we had an incident. Now, who do we call? Should we call legal? Do we call the CMO? Do we call who is the head of communications, right? We don't talk to them in security. So we're past those kind of days. As you sit in your chair and you think about now about how we have to build the relationships and the kind of communication paths and workflows, if you will, how do you see the landscape as a communications professional and executive?
So I'm just kind of back up from that a little bit. I think it starts with how, you know, not just the communications process when there's an incident or if there's a new program or what have you that the CISO or the security team has to roll out. It really comes back to, I think there's a whole totally new structure of accountability, not only for the communications, but for the security itself across the C-suite, where it used to be all eyes were on the CISO and like the CISO is responsible and the CISO's head's on the chopping block and the CISO goes in front of the board. But there's a lot of work, I think, that has to be done at the forefront that starts with communications across the leadership team of any organization, where they know what their roles are in helping to enforce and communicate the policies, or whether it's a policy or awareness or training or what have you, to their teams. In order to help the security organization. And I think that they're somewhat culpable if they don't do that and something goes wrong because of some action that might have happened from their teams. Not that it's a blame game. You don't ever want to blame, but obviously you do, again, when you do like your post investigation to figure out what wrong, you know, you're looking to see the source of it. So I kind of when I think about it now, I take a step back I mean, think about any policy you roll out to a company. It can't just be like, for instance, if I roll out a comms policy, a general one for my company, it can't just be me shouting from the rooftop saying, everybody do this. The CRO has to, the head of engineering, CTO has to, et cetera, with their teams. It's not one person's responsibility. And that's very similar to the CISO. So now answering directly your question, I think when you get into the communications process now, it has to be a whole leadership response and communications project very quickly. And the CMO is heavily involved because we're more likely to communications pros or have them on our teams internally to make sure that people know what they have to do next. And then eventually controlling what goes out to whether it's an SEC report or a broader communication. So long answer, but it's really something that's been eating at me for a bit that I really think people need to think about and talk about. The whole executive team is responsible for security. It's not just the CISO and their team in a vacuum. I don't know, Matt, what you think of that.
Yeah, I think let's take it in two parts. I love the way you broke it up because it speaks directly to what Mike was talking about of that time the communications happen. Yes, there's hopefully a well-oiled plan that's been worked out, but that's all built on relationships and communication paths and understanding what's going on well before anything else happened, because you don't want that education and the learning to all have to happen the time or the day or the minute you've got something hit. I think, Mike, that's what you talk about. That's what you're you talk about investing all of the time and building those relationships and not talking down to people about security, but helping figure out that translation from security ease into business or into customer or whatever language.
Yeah, I think that's right. And there are 2 points I want to make to kind of piggyback on Jen's point. And one is to reiterate the importance of senior team alignment, right? Security is going to ask the rest of the business to do certain things. They may not like those things, right? We've got to test this stuff. We've got to kick things back. If we have a security defect, we may, have to quarantine or take down active systems that are customer impacting because we possibly have, some type of data loss. So we've got to figure that out, right? These are things that business leaders, 1, don't want to hear about, 2, don't want to do, right? So if you don't have that alignment at the senior level, it doesn't happen. Right. You can get and I'll use a term. We're going to try to keep it a family show. Right. But I call it grin effing. Right. And use your imagination in terms of that. It's like, oh, yeah, I'm doing that. No effing way am I doing that. Right. And they'll tell you right to your face. Oh, that sounds great. Right. And they're, kind of relaying that back to, kind of their team that says we don't have to take that seriously. Right. If you have the senior folks, right, the CEO, right, the chief legal officer or general counsel or the CFO in there basically saying, no, this is pretty important when we've got a critical vulnerability and something we're about to ship, to customers, or, obviously software that we're going to ship to customers. We've got to block the build, right? We've got to break that build if we're in a DevOps, type of mentality. And they have to have the air cover from that perspective. Right. So one, without alignment, none of this stuff works, right? Without, kind of senior level buy-in for the fact that security is a corporate imperative. And really the way to know this, right, is I've never spoken to a CEO who has told me security is not important to them. Not once. Right. It's what they do. Right. They'll say what they think they need to say. It's what do they do? Right? Do they fund it? Do they support it? Do they, kind of allow business leaders to kind of go around the machine or kind of obfuscate and violate some of the policies that were there? If you've got those kind of issues, man, you don't have that kind of alignment. So without the alignment, I mean, you're nowhere. And that really, I think, is highlighting the point that Jen made, is that if everybody's not on the same page, you've got very little chance to have a successful communications program because you've just got a bunch of different messages flying around within the team.
Say some more about your experience, Jen, from the alignment perspective. What are, from a communications professional, what are the challenges you experience? Mike and I can probably talk more about the CTO and the CISO side of it. What's your side of that coin of getting everyone on the same page?
Herding cats. And obviously what's interesting is that, I've spent most of my career working for security companies, and they're not, we all know security companies are not immune to incidents. And so you have to have those crisis communications plans and escalations and all of that stuff developed and know what to do. And I think, it really depends on the org, the size of the org, the CEO. I think Mike nailed it when he said, it's really top down. If the CEO says, well, security is very important to me, but allows marketing, pick up my people, marketing to use a bunch of cloud apps that aren't sanctioned by the security team because it makes our jobs easier. Maybe we get more leads in faster, and he or she are getting pressured by the board, right? Then all of that goes out the window. So from my experience, it's there's always a kind of like, not me, not my issue when something happens, in my experience, regardless of the company, regardless of how wonderful the people are involved. And I think, before I get into what I think should happen, there's always, in my experience, there's the first question, especially again, outside of a brief stint I was at Cisco after an acquisition, and my time at SourceFire, we were public and I wasn't involved in this piece there, but I mostly worked for smaller private companies. So there's not as much of that, like, regulatory pressure to actually report things, the first question is also, do we have to say anything? Do we even have to communicate this? Can we sweep this under the rug and hope that Brian Krebs doesn't find out about it? That's the first conversation that happened. That happened to me at a company not long ago, not the one I work for currently, where it was basically all the conversation. I was screaming like, we need a plan. We can't risk this. We're going to lose customer trust if we don't tell the customers what happened, even though it was a minor non-material data that got out there because of a user error and it wasn't an issue with our product. We have to own that. They chose not to own that. I don't think it ever came back to bite them. Good on them. But I think that's that me in the CMO role, and then even when I was in the communications officer role, like that drives you insane, because the first thing as a business, no matter what your role is, should be about trust and integrity and how you run the business with your employees, your customers, your partners, whomever else. And every single executive on a team is responsible for revenue, reputation, business continuity, and everything, and across that line. But unfortunately, in my experience, it's really varied. And there are some folks that have been like, all right, Jen, you've done this, you lead us, you help us. And of course, there's lots of inputs from the technical teams because I'm only technical enough to be dangerous. And then there's the ones that are like, Jen, how do we hide this? And then I'm like, I won't do it. And that creates all kinds of internal conflict. And then I don't stay long.
It reminds me
And I think that's an important aspect of that, right? If you can't get that alignment and you don't have the support that you know you need, it's unlikely that you're going to be successful. So go find
Right.
another thing. And if you're on this call and you're at a senior security professional level, I suspect finding a new gig won't be all that difficult. Now you got to find the right fit. You got to, and I don't want to minimize, kind of the kind of considerations that go into making a move. But I can tell you, if for something that I believe is relatively simple, right, which is if we've done something wrong, let's craft a message that we're not running away from it. Right. We want to be honest. And Jen, you were joking about, a company you work for. I'm like, I don't think she worked for Okta. Right. Because they were obviously no, and I know it wasn't them, but they were obviously an example earlier this year where they had a very, very minor issue. I mean, it was some third party reseller in South America that, somebody got access, read only access to 2 of their customer accounts. I mean, read only. Right. I mean, this is as minor as it gets. And it became this big fiasco because Okta just wouldn't come clean. Right. It cost them in stock. I've talked to a whole mess of investors about I've lost my confidence in them and customers. What should I be closing this deal? And all because they didn't say it was a pretty minor thing. Some dudes got read access. We fixed the issue. Right. We've locked down that problem and we're moving on. Right. And they didn't do that. There was obfuscation. There was, it just felt wrong. Right. It felt like they were hiding stuff. And if it feels like they're hiding stuff, man, that is not a good place to be in. Right. But it all gets back to this idea of trust and collaboration. Right. And then let's, kind of segue into the whole business centricity of what security has to be now. Right. Jen works for a security company. Right. So you've got some specific considerations because you work in a security company, right? Breach happens for security company, bad news. So we have to be, probably more over rotate on that front, right? Financial information, healthcare information, all of those where customer information is at risk, you've got to over rotate on security. You make bolts. I'm not going to say we're going to minimize it, but in terms of my investment priorities, I don't know that, kind of securities. Maybe if you have some patent on your bolt, that's fine. But if you just make a crap ton of bolts, not a lot of IP in the business, it's really all about operational excellence. Maybe I have different considerations. And that's really the point, right? You build your security program for the company you're in, for the business you're in, for the culture that you're in. Right? And you've got to be able to really modulate what your processes are going to be based upon those considerations. Because, if you come from Morgan Stanley and you show up at, kind of a very small credit union and they're like, oh my God, this is the second coming because of all that great experience, you'll find out pretty quickly my considerations in a small financial platform are far different than in, a global 10 bank.
True. Size definitely says the company impact, the market presence, et cetera, make a huge difference. So let me present the other side of the coin. You can agree or disagree. We're also numb to the announcement of security breaches. It's not a daily thing. It's a hourly, minute by minute thing almost. And yes, there are the high profiles, Oktas, or it's not the days of Target, right? Back when so many thousands, millions of credit card records got stolen. In a way, it's to your point, Mike, of if you go and hide it, you're guaranteed you're going to make a big deal about it. Well, you too, you made that point too, Jen. But if you disclose it, here's what we did, what happened, here's what we're doing about it, here's what the impact was, et cetera. It pretty much moves past you, unless maybe your security company has got a bigger impact because you're not, But the fact is, all companies either have or will or both get breached. It's a fact of life. It's just world we live in. Have we gotten to the point where we're so numb about it, it doesn't matter, just disclose it and move on? What do you think, so. Jen?
You sound like
presenting kind of the edge case here.
I should say I would hope not. I mean, I am happy that, this is a double-edged sword, right? So obviously there's much more frequency in the disclosure of breaches now. It's not in the days of there's one big one and everybody talks about it for 2 weeks. I am happy that because of that a lot of the what's the peanut gallery, kind of everybody like assessing what must have happened with that company and blaming them and saying what they should have done stuff has stopped, right? And it's become something that like, be careful what you say, because this could happen to you tomorrow, right? But I don't think people, I don't think people have become numb to it. I think they've gotten to a point of, I've accepted that we're going to get breached and we need to prepare for it. You still have your like people out there like babbling on Twitter about things they don't know anything about, but I think it's less numb and more about like another moment of, okay, so this isn't getting any better. And why are we not stopping this? And why are these things still happening? But I guess I better make sure that I bring this new example up with my board or with my security team and alter our plans accordingly, because we don't want to make the mistake that they made. And you're constantly in whack-a-mole mode, just waiting to see what's going to happen. And to touch on your point, like it's a totally different situation if you're a security company, right? Because when you're a security company and something happens, that's huge. I do think it comes down to how you handle it. And the biggest reason I think some security companies try to hide it is they're afraid to lose deals in flight. And I think that's the biggest mistake, because then you lose renewed customers, which is much bigger. It's much more expensive to get a new customer than to keep trust with an existing customer. So I think I don't know, that was kind of a flurry of thought. You guys know me, that's the way I think, but that's where I am on the numb versus not numb and how to react and how to remediate your comms plan as new stuff happens.
I think we've gotten to a point where, breach notifications have been normalized, but there are 3 situations where it's, it'll make news, right? First is scale. So when you start getting into the, all right, 150 million, kind of records, that's kind of passe, right? So when we keep hitting these additional, kind of levels, oh my God, 300 million, right? Oh my God, Facebook got busted in 1 billion, right? I mean, that's going to be next, right? So it just, when there's scale, there's news in that, right? Something that's just particularly egregious and stupid, right? Kind of that is, that'll make news, because you're just like, really? Could they have been that stupid, right? So folks will jump on that because they just love the story of somebody that was just, ostensibly does something that is just so dumb that you can't believe it. It's like shocking in its idiocy. So you just, like, I'll cover that. Let's talk about that, because that's just like the dumbest thing I've heard. And then something that is new and innovative. Right. And I'll use the example from a couple of years ago, and there are obviously new ones, but when some of the details around Stuxnet came out, right, that made huge news. Why? Because it was a space alien attack. You were just like, oh my God, I didn't know that was a thing. That's a thing. Oh my God, right? So we started talking a lot about, kind of what other things that we didn't think. I mean, air gap, I see your air gap and I say, screw that. I'm going to, totally transgress your air gap, right? And everybody who's like, oh my God, I put all my stuff in an air gap. Am I not safe and secure on that front? So you have all those issues. And we kind of dove into and hit on a lot of the technical things. But the point is, you need to have a plan, right? To Jen's point, right? You need to have a communication plan for the fact of what happens if. Right. And part of it is kind of a game. It's not a lot different than threat modeling. So all my security folks out there, right? I mean, you're sitting there going, how could I get killed today? Right. And then so when you figure out, okay, this is how I can get killed today, then you got to say, what am I going to tell to the markets? Who do I have to talk to? How do I have to keep my board, and my audit committee on board and in line from that standpoint? And it starts to become, again, just more of an external communications threat model than it is, kind of an, oh, how am I going to protect my systems threat model? But the mentality is the same. Right. And I think that that's a metaphor that can really help security folks to start to understand, oh, so if this happens, I have to have a plan for that. Well, exactly. And by the way, you can't make that plan. You have to go find the Jen in your organization who's going to help you craft those messages and make sure that you've got a process in place so that when something does, go down, you're ready to really kind of go into action. Just like if you find out somebody's device got compromised, you know exactly how to deal with it, right? Same thing, but different.
I'm curious, Jen, do you, from a marketing communications perspective, do you have different scenarios of the kind of security incidents and how you're going to handle that from your perspective? I'd love to learn from you how you think about that problem.
Yeah, so most of that's a good question, and it's good for people to consider, especially I think I read this, it was in an Exabeam report. It was like, everybody has to be in the assume breach mentality now. And I thought that made a lot of sense. And so you have to kind of be in an assume breach or assume attack mode as a communications professional as well. And so the scenarios, I'm just naming a few, but it even goes beyond security when you look at crises. It's like a death of an executive. There's some kind of harassment issue. There's some kind of other legal issue. There's a financial issue. There's all, you have to, just like that, you have your communications trees and you have it for was it an insider issue? Was it an accident? Was it a nation state situation? Was it, was there a flaw in the product? So you have what type of response was it? Who needs to be in the know immediately? Who needs to be part of the communications planning? Who are the immediate audiences that you need to communicate with? What do you need to communicate? What do you need to do? You have to do your risk assessment. What's the worst case scenario of what's going to happen? Kind of what Mike was saying with threat modeling, how am I going to die if this goes wrong, right? What are okay, so they received this message. Here are the 5 ways they can react to it. So how do we respond to those things? For every single scenario, whether it's security or not, anything that could impact the bottom line of your company. Every communications person should have it. My company's small, right? I've been with Notography for 6 months now. We're a small Series A startup. I haven't rolled anything official out to the company because it's small at this point, but I have all that in my back pocket should we need it, because I just know that in my role, it would be irresponsible as a CMO at a company that size. I am also the comms person because we're a small marketing team. It would be irresponsible to not have these plans. Right. And even if I haven't already vetted them with my boss or the CTO or whomever else that needs to be involved yet, because of the size that we're at, I need to be ready to at a moment's notice. And I think every marketer should keep that in mind, and building trust with the security team. That's really hard because a lot of security teams don't trust marketers because for all the reasons we know, right? With just crazy FUD and all the things that I try not to be guilty of, but you never know. So you really have to build that trust and be like, hey, I'm not going to screw you over whether you have something good to put out or if you have something bad to report. I'm your friend and we are a team. I think that's really important. You got to be ready for that. It's got to be documented.
Security people don't trust anybody, so don't feel bad. Okay.
That's fair. That's fair. I'm just saying maybe some marketers might have earned it. That's all.
Some more than
yeah.
So let's kind of shift a little bit in terms of the mechanics of the program, Jen, because when we talk about kind of rolling something out like this, I mean, how often do you communicate to folks? I mean, you run exec team meetings and, you tell your story when you do that. Is that sufficient? What if the CISO isn't in, kind of those meetings? How often do you have to get in front of these people? Is it a FaceTime thing? Can I do leverage communications, a newsletter, a weekly video? I mean, what, when you're trying to think about rolling out a communications plan, and obviously we're talking within the context of kind of a security program, a security policy, but we can even broaden it because I think a lot of the techniques and tactics are going to be the same, right? It's about how often do I get to them, how much repetition do they need, given what all the stuff that's flying at everybody's head every day, right? How often do we have to keep in front of them to make sure that what we're talking about is front and center? How do we not get kind of bogged down with all the other kind of nonsense that's out there? I mean, do you kind of have some points or things that you've done as you roll out communications plans in some of these companies you worked in?
Yeah. So again, it really depends on the size and the maturity and where we're at and the risk level, right? For where the company's at. But in terms of rolling it out, you make your list of the key stakeholders, like who are the must-have teams, and maybe the leaders and maybe some folks on their teams that have to buy into this because they have to action it. And then who are the nice to haves. Now, some of the nice to haves, maybe some of the other executives, but they still have to be engaged and informed, right? So I think it's really important. So I never rely on executive team meetings for those types of things. One, they always go off agenda, no matter what, because there's always some customer issue or some other thing, or the board wants something, or there's always something that throws those meetings off, right? So there's almost like a communications type council or whatever you want to call it. That sounds a little maybe too formal, and conceptually a council where it's like, all right, we're rolling out an overall communications policy for the company. Here's the here's the overall overarching if, when, what, who, et cetera. HR and the CEO, and usually the CFO, because of the whole remediation, reputation, continuity, are involved in like the baseline of it. And then for the different scenarios, there are the must-have folks. You cannot roll it out unless you have the buy-in of the people, and you can't and you chase them down if you have to, right? It's a dependency to be able to do it. And I know that sounds really silly, but not silly, but basic, is like you chase them down. It's like, I must align with the CFO on this. I must align with the CISO on this. And there's also I must align with the CRO on this, because the CRO has to agree on how we communicate to the customers. They're usually the ones that like it the least that you have to put these things out there, of course. But the smart ones, the good ones, comply with it because they understand the long-term impact. And then you don't check off and actually roll out the plan until all those people are there for it. And when you roll it out to the company, you have all those people usually do a company-wide meeting followed up with a written communication. You have every single one of those people that are the key communicators for it speak during that meeting, so every team hears it for the most important folks, and it's not just coming from marketing, because that's going to be a big failure. No offense to my people out there, but we know we all have lived it. They're like, oh, it's a marketing thing. Versus, oh wait, there's the CEO, there's the CISO. What's wrong? Let's listen. It's just a fact.
It really interesting, because it seems like one of the symptoms of an unhealthy situation is, Jen, just keep us off the Wall Street Journal front page. Mike, whatever you do, make sure there's not a breach, right? It's sort of that you own this and don't ever let that happen. I've been in those situations. You're like, yeah, well, sorry, but that is going to happen. I hope we're never on the Wall Street Journal front page. We're going to be on somebody's front page at some point in time. It's just going to happen, probably.
But I actually think that's a very important point, Mitch, is that how do we start to communicate and really impart the urgency and importance of what it is that we do to a lot of these folks. And it's not about, pointing to a clip from 10 years ago about the APT or whatever the breach du jour is, or,
Right.
whatever Krebs has been up to. Brian Krebs, right? Not Chris Krebs. No, we got two Krebs. We got two Krebs we got to deal with now. Brian Krebs on that front, what he's discovered. And I think a lot of it gets back to, one, what we were talking about before, kind of collaboration, having those relationships, but being able to frame the issue within the context of the business, right? And that's the R word, right? Risk. So what you have to do is, we think about security issues, right? Most CISOs do, right? You think about things within the prism of security issues, but what you have to do in order to really be a convincing and successful leader in security is be able to translate that security problem into a business risk, right? And you can't do that if you don't understand the business. So this is something in our last episode, I got on the soapbox and it was kind of awkward, it's down in the Zoom box and it's a soapbox, it just wasn't great. But kind of the importance of that, but the importance of that was really about just, again, kind of beating home that message that if you can't frame your issues in business terms that business people are going to understand, you've got no shot, right? And again, Jen, you got to do it, right? You're talking about positioning or other kind of things in a way that the salespeople have to understand, right? In a way that the engineering folks have to understand. Well, you can't build it that way. It can't look like that because we've got to tell a different story. Same thing in security. Right? If you can't frame those issues within the context of something that's going to impact the ability of these senior leaders to make their numbers or achieve their goals, you are just in the way. Right. And if you're in the way, they've got, these magical powers to make you go away. So part of that, again, it's really about relationship building, but it's also about ensuring that you understand and have the contextual nuance of the business to be able to make sure that folks understand about, what that process looks like. We get breached here because one of your folks didn't follow the policies. It plays out like this, which equals bad day for that executive. If you can't communicate it in terms of bad day, missed bonus, right? Not being able to do the country club, although that's an old thing, right? We used to use that example all the time. Like, oh, you got to do that so they can make their car payments or whatever. I don't know. That's kind of old school stuff. Right now, it's really about, kind of being a steward for the organization and making sure that they can meet the needs that they have, with the diligence to ensure that they're protecting the assets of the business.
Yeah, Mitch, I'd like to add something to that. I think, I used to talk a lot about how every marketer or comms person, whether they work in security or not, I've done interviews about this. Mike, you and I have talked about this. I've done talks about this. Regardless of the type of company that you work for, you should have an understanding of security and how to communicate research or findings or anything that might impact your company, right? But I think now it's gotten to the level of you need to get every single marketer or communications person needs to have an understanding of breach response and how to build a communications plan, internal and external, to manage that. And there are a lot of firms out there that will charge you $1 gazillion and probably not do a really good job to help you with those things that you can run to. But I honestly think that the most like any comms and marketing person is responsible for reputation, business continuity, helping with revenue, all of those things. So regardless of the company that you're at in the industry, B2B, B2C, whatever, maybe not a boat builder, as Mike said, you need to educate yourself on how to handle these things because they will inevitably come up in some way. Whether your security team comes up with some random thing they want to take to the market and you can't be blindsided by it, or your company gets hit.
Well, this is a masterclass series, and what we mean by that, it's sharing knowledge, it's helping people that are progressing through their career. Maybe they're aspired to, or they've entered into a CISO role. Maybe they're in one for a while, and we're all always learning. But it's still you're making that transition from super technical to now I got to speak business too. Why don't we wrap up with this thought? What is it, Jen? And I'll ask Mike, you kind of the other side of the coin. What is it that you either hope or wish that security professionals knew or would learn that you see from your from working with multiple CISOs, CTOs, technical people in your role? What is the one thing you kind of one or two? I hope they kind of figured this out, because this is going to help them a lot.
That the CMO is their friend and is there to help.
Just you, Jen. Just you. You're their friend.
I'm their friend. I'm the friend of every CISO. But that is there to help them, and to plan early. So it's not a fire drill. I mean, it's always going to be a fire drill to some degree, because you don't want to be doing these things. But plan early and build trust with your marketer, and work in tandem with them to build a communications plan. So it's not a bunch of push and pull, and you don't have your marketing team out there trying to represent you without your buy-in, because that ultimately leads to the mistakes that publicly look like you were responsible. And that's not fair to anyone, right? Those are my two things I wish for.
It's a good point, because, we talk about CISOs keeping their job, right, when something happens. And I would venture to guess, if you don't have a great relationship with your CMO, certainly there's trust there, you're probably going to be on the end of losing your job, because it's not going to go well externally, right? Really good point. Mike, from your perspective, what do you wish upcoming, maybe existing CISOs knew about this issue around communications?
That is, the higher in the organization that you climb, the more your job is predicated upon relationships, influence, and persuasion. And that's a very hard thing for technical people to get their arms around, right? It's like, but I did this, it worked out. And I told the story, Mr. Van, right? You may be right, but you'll still be dead. He was my driver's ed teacher. And he, kind of told me when I was about to do something that was right, but it would have resulted in me getting into an accident. It's the same kind of thing, right? You may be right, but you're not going to be successful if you can't figure out how to frame that in a way that your peers on the team, understand it. And remember, we're a service organization. We don't, in few cases, does the security team contribute to the revenues of the organization. It can certainly impact the revenues of the organization, but in terms of contributing the revenues of the organization, less so, right? Which means we need to ensure that, again, it's a position of influence, right? Somebody who's responsible for huge deals, right, bring in huge amounts of money to the organization, they can kind of do what they want within certain, parameters, obviously, but they get a lot more leeway than somebody who's really a service organization to the rest of the business. So if you can just get your arms around the fact that, this is not about my proficiency in, keeping all of my desktops, updated, or all of my servers, kind of at the right patch levels, right? This is about making sure that we've got an agenda, we've got a communications plan, we are communicating that to the rest of the organization, understand why they're doing that. We talked about the why a lot, kind of in the fourth masterclass, right? The importance of understanding why we're asking people to do this stuff makes it a lot easier to go down, especially if they don't like to do it. But really just to get your arms around the fact that my job now is to influence and persuade, and less about, kind of actually doing security things like you've done for most of your career.
Really good point. It's about communications. Believe it or not. I heard a phrase once you reminded me of Mike. It's great to be right. You just don't want to be dead right.
Yeah.
That's right.
I was thinking one where I've heard this a lot. I've said this a lot. It's like, do you want to be right, or do you want to be happy? Do you want to be right, or do you want to be successful? Right? You can sit in your opinions all day long and hold to them, but if everything's blowing up outside the wall,
that's right.
Yeah. So I think
how
it's
did
a really
that
good
go?
point.
Right? Good luck with that.
Yeah.
Well, it's been fantastic. I want to remind everybody, our audience, that we have our kind of live interactive wrap-up episode of this series, the masterclass. We call this masterclass, Catching Lightning in a Bottle. It's the essentials, bringing it all together. And it's August 30th at 1 p.m. Eastern. You can sign up by going to Security Boulevard or DevOps.com. There'll be a registration page there for webinars, is what it's listed under. So it's live, as in we interact with the audience. We incorporate your comments, your questions, your suggestions. Sometimes it goes interesting places. It always does, actually. And we will try to touch on the topics that we've hit on across this masterclass series. So Jen, thank you so much. You truly made it a masterclass with your presence, your knowledge, and experience. And it's great to do with a colleague that we know and trust so well. Mike, my friend, colleague as well. Always, it's a pleasure. And we talk all the time, and I learn something every time. So it's great. It's awesome. I'm walking around smarter every day from you both. And I know that our audience is too as well. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for CISO Talk, our masterclass series. And we look forward to having you join us on the 30th of August. And be sure to tune in. We've got a lot of other great episodes on digitalanarchist.com, on Techstrong.tv. Thanks to you both, Jen and Mike.
Thank you.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, welcome back to KubeCon, Cloud Native Com. Mitch Ashley here with Razil
Hi,
Tabib,
yes.
CEO of CodeFresh. Welcome.
Thank you.
I'm relieving
Happy to
Alan
be
here, so I got to get my rhythm going. Thanks for you're working with me here. So a developer conference, it just feels amazing to be walking around t-shirts and backpacks and talking code, right?
It feels great to be out again, to meet with partners, to meet with customers, to meet with leaders in our industry. So it is feeling great.
Man, I want to get out my JetBrains, IDE and start writing some code. Yeah, we'll see about that later. So, well, introduce yourself for folks who may not know you, and tell us a little bit about CodeFresh.
Sure. So my name is Raziel, and I'm the CEO and founder of CodeFresh. And basically, our mission is to help organizations deploy software way more frequent than before. Almost every organization now, they always strive to deploy software frequently. CodeFresh, we enable them to do that. We're basically a GitOps company. I think as we all know, GitOps becoming the way of how to deploy software. So we help our customers implement GitOps on top of Argo CD. And yeah, it's been great so far with this event, really seeing how Argo is picking so much momentum in the market.
Interesting. I'm hearing GitOps more and more, and as a topic, I was at an analyst event for telco, and they were talking about edge computing and edge networking and GitOps and pop-up networks and declarative kind of infrastructure definition. So it's gaining some traction, and obviously good for you.
Yeah.
We're happy about that. What do you think it is about GitOps that is getting people's attention and why they're adopting it?
I think it reminds me the days where, we've all seen how everyone is moving from waterfall to agile. And basically the reasoning behind that movement was we need to release software way more frequent. We can't just held ourselves back with these releases every year and a half or every few months. We have to move much faster. And GitOps is exactly along the very same lines. It's a deployment practice that allows organizations to deploy frequently, multiple times a day. It takes away all this whole chaotic, previous way of us deploying. Everything is stored in Git. You can roll back, you can see what the changes and so on. And it's part of this really kind of an ongoing transition that everything is stored in Git. Not just the application code, but also the infrastructure as a code, and now the application configuration as a code. So, and what's exciting in this event that we've actually seen, it's no longer kind of the practice of the cutting edge unicorn or startup of the world. It's really coming into mainstream, so our customers now are more and more Fortune 500 that they realize we made the first kind of decision to move into Kubernetes and, cloud native technologies. The second question is like, okay, so now after we made that decision, how fast we can deploy to this infrastructure. Mm-hmm. And that's where, practices like GitOps, open source projects like Argo comes into play.
Well, and I think it's part of taking some of the complexity out of all the things that we use, Kubernetes being a big part of it, of course, but the stack that we're using, and that changes constantly. Yes. Often I don't think about things as being in any state anymore. It's always fluid. It's always changing. Just assume it's under constant change. Exactly. You can't look at it at any one time and see the same thing twice. And that's the world we're in. I mean, imagine Fortune 500 that does some kind of business partnership with another company, and they want to open a new service and put it in Saudi Arabia and South America. And I'm not going to go provision data centers to go do that,
exactly.
Right? And I'm not going to provision whole stacks. I want to be able to just say, this is what it looks like, go deploy it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that the Fortune 500 companies across almost every industry, they realize that there's like new companies coming in that disrupting this industry with software. And if they will not make this shift to move as fast, they will basically lose their leadership in the market. They will lose their momentum. So, we had one of the very early insurtech companies and the company as a customer that came in, and now we've actually have traditional, big insurance firm in the US that say, okay, we can't just, stand back. We have to also see how we're moving fast. Same from, fintech companies, the medical companies, and so on. So, as Andreessen Horowitz, said that, software is eating the world. I think we are getting more and more strong feel of how this is becoming. COVID to some level accelerated it when we really kind of invested a lot in technology to help us close a lot of the gaps of things that we couldn't do. But it's just this momentum continues, and across every industry, gaming industry, medical industry, fintech industry, they're all looking to see how we can deploy software more frequently, but again, just have it in a way that we're not compromising on quality. There is no chaos in our deployment and so on. And GitOps comes right into that niche to help them with streamlining these deployments and stay, organized, stay stable, stay with high quality, secure, and so on.
Yeah, it's interesting. We're no longer chasing the killer app.
Yes.
Right? You never hear anybody talking about that anymore because
that's true.
What's an app today may not be one tomorrow, and we've got the next thing coming out a few days later, right? Tell us a little bit more about CodeFresh. I know you've had some announcements and made some really good progress here recently.
So we've been, in the market really helping our customers with deploying to Kubernetes. And more recently, we've kind of really focusing on helping them implementing GitOps, and beyond GitOps, progressive delivery. As you said, we're continually making changes. And as we're continually making changes, one way to mitigate the risk of the changes is doing progressive delivery, like implement Canary or Blue-Green, in which we're just not changing the old version to the new one. We gradually expose it to our customers, and at any point of time, we run all of these checks to see that nothing goes wrong. What we've announced this event, which is really, really exciting for us, because Algo came up as, now really the leading technology. Leading technology for GitOps, the recent CNCF survey, Algo came up as one of the fastest growing projects. But with this announcement, we're actually making the usage of Argo CD, Argo rollout, and so on, so easy. In the same way that GitHub in the past did it for Git. You want to use Git, don't go and install it. You go in one click, you get this Git, just go to work.
Your account, you're ready to go.
We announced the same thing for Argo CD. You want to get Argo CD, you're getting up and running. Connect your cluster in a secure way and start deploying. You need multiple instances of Argo CD because you want to scale. And we have, we spoke with some of our customers, Fortune 500, they have hundreds instances of Argo CD. You want to run 100 instances, you want to make sure that each cluster has its own dedicated for security reason. In one click, you get it like up and running. You can integrate it with the rest of your ecosystem. You can have secret management. So we're super excited about it because, we basically we really democratize the usage of Argo CD even more than it is now because it's a great technology already.
It's interesting, and you use the term progressive delivery. We usually hear about continuous delivery.
Yes.
Which is descriptive in itself, but I think I like progressive because that's how apps come out, right?
Yes.
Or more than just apps. All the infrastructure, all the code, all the software.
It is becoming, and it's on multiple layers. We're really talking now about the progressive delivery of, the code itself, of how we can start exposing the code to larger and larger, but gradually are part of our customers. But you can look at it in other layers. When we work with our partners, whether it's Split or Launch Darkly for feature flagging, it's a similar concept of, I'm implementing the features, but I'm not immediately open it for everyone. I want to minimize the risk. So I open it to a subset of our customers, and then, so we're working with them too, but it's customers are implementing this progressive delivery on each level of their application.
I don't know about Tesla and GitOps, but Tesla as a product is what I've described to people as progressive delivery, right? On all levels, because they may be upgrading the software that controls the motors, electric motors, the interface, what we see as an app on the dashboard, driving, whatever it might be. All of those things are on their own kind of path and frequency and feature rollout or upgrades or trials with a few customers, that progressive delivery. And it's a great model. I think people can relate to that. Like, it is an ecosystem of software that is all happening in concert with each other.
And Tesla is just one example. We also have customers, large customers that have medical devices in hundreds of hospitals in the US, and their ability to gradually push these deployments to these remote devices and try it out in a subset in some hospitals, see how it works, and then roll it out to the rest of the hospitals. That's the future. It is exciting because that's the future. That's how everything is connected, and software is really driving how our life is getting more and more interesting and more easy and enjoyable and so on.
I know you had a packed session here. You were talking at a session, I believe, at KubeCon. They had really good attendance.
We have Dan who on our team. We had a very, very busy sessions. I think most of them were around GitOps. We had a GitOps day here before the event starts, and that was the biggest GitOps we ever had. I think we're comparing that to the one we had in Los Angeles in the last KubeCon. This one was packed. You couldn't bring more people in. Also the sessions, the maintainer sessions for Argo CD. It reminds me when, the open source project really becoming the standards. We've seen the traffic here, both in the CNCF Argo booth as well as at ours. So it is this event for us. It's really very strong reinforcement that our efforts in pushing this technology forward are really being receptive by the community, and the community want us to push it even more. We had launched end of last year certifications for Argo CD, really allowing you to get the basics and principles of Argo CD and GitOps. It's been a few months. We have over 8,000, certified developers that wanted to learn about, Argo CD. There's certain companies that make this certification kind of mandatory as part of the onboarding of their employees, because that's the new way of deploying software.
That's exciting times. It's great to talk with you. Congratulations on a successful
so much.
show. Thanks for joining us. We got more interviews coming up. Be sure and check out CodeFresh. Is it .io or .com?
CodeFresh.io.
Yeah, I thought so. .io. So be sure to check that out.
Thank you so much.
More interviews coming up. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you in a few.
Looking for a live conference focused on the tools, technologies, and practices most important to your business? Innotech conferences are live one-day business and technology conferences highlighting the latest in trends for IT leaders, developers, and IT professionals. Each event combines education, innovation, peer-to-peer networking, and the latest technology and business solutions for a diverse IT-focused audience. Innotech conferences occur throughout the year in strategic regional locations, bringing together technology professionals from various industries to learn about the solutions, practices, and tools impacting their day-to-day work and gain insight into what's to come. Presenters at Innotech conferences are selected and curated to ensure each session provides the most up-to-date and relevant information without any hype. Whether you're interested in digital transformation, cybersecurity, cloud, IT leadership, or DevOps, Innotech conferences deliver. 2022 events are scheduled to be held in Austin, Dallas, Oklahoma City, Houston, and Washington, D.C. Innotech conferences are produced by Techstrong Live and powered by Techstrong Group.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Mark Logan, who's the newly appointed CEO for One Identity. We'll be talking about everything from managing identities and zero trust. But Mark, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Michael. Pleasure to be here.
So what attracted you to One Identity? What do you think is going to be the opportunity for the company? And where are you going to go from here?
Well, allow me to start with the macro view. So we participate in the broad cybersecurity industry, as you well know, and the industry itself is literally booming in a global way. So the overarching security industry is one that I've been in the past. Last 3 years, I was at a SIM vendor, which is a security information and event management vendor. So first and foremost, great market. Our subset of the market, identity management, is an equally fast-growing and needed subsector of cybersecurity. So we're in a very hot space. Some would say a recession-proof space. And One Identity has quite a reputation for serving market needs globally. I would say, furthermore, where we participate we have 4 different silos of solutions, 3 of which are covered by Gartner Group. And Gartner Group has given us some very nice leading quadrant, Magic Quadrant status. So we just had one for the PAM market, privileged access management, came out last week. So I think independent of where you look at our various key direct products, we've got leadership status in each one. So those are attractive.
I think if you look at the market today, password management used to be a niche space. It was basically kind of, a small group of cybersecurity people that either were passionately involved in it or was fundamentally a chore that needed to be done either way. But is that changing as we look to this whole zero trust model? And is there much more of a conversation and awareness of how to manage identities and the need for it? And how do you think that's going to evolve?
We believe so, Michael. We believe it is changing and has maybe evolved from a nice to have to a must have mandate. And the stature of the CISO, for example, Chief Information Security Officers, they've become much more in the forefront of securing and protecting their enterprises. So we do believe that our subset of this market continues to grow. And it might be worth noting too. 2 weeks ago, we launched a strategy, part of our vision, and we're calling it the Unified Identity Management Platform. So we're bringing together these 4 different key aspects of identity management into one unified platform. And I suspect your listeners the following will resonate with them. Chief Information Security Officers, CIOs, et cetera, they want less vendors in general. They want more of a single point of accountability Said coarsely, one throat to choke. And that's particularly germane when it comes to their security assets. So there can't be finger pointing around potential for vulnerabilities or breaches, et cetera. So this unified platform approach brings together three key aspects of identity management, we think in a unique fashion at One Identity. So you'll hear more and more, and your listeners may hear more and more from us about this bringing together of these key disciplines.
We hear a lot more about this passwordless future that we're all supposedly marching to, but I think that may take some time. But how do you think identities might evolve around passwords versus when do I not use a password, and what's the mix of those things going to look like?
Well, we're hard to say exactly where that will evolve, and in fact, I'm 4 weeks on the job, so all of the trends, some of them are evolutionary, but here's what I will say: we're doubling down on our investments in listening to our customers and diving in serving our customers. I'll give you a couple of examples. We just announced our customer advisory board and our customer event for Europe. That's going to take place in November, December, and the reason for noting it right now, Michael, is that's an opportunity for us to further pulse our hundreds and thousands of customers around specifically what they need. And we've built our reputation on listening to our customers and together collectively driving forward with our roadmap and our solutions. We're doing the same event in March in Miami with our US-based customers. So I think the answer to your question is we really pulse our customers and analysts in the market.
In your brief conversations with those customers so far, what's your sense of their biggest issues or their biggest source of angst right now?
Well, I think it does tie back to the unified platform approach. The big concern is no chief information security officer wants to have a vulnerability or a potential breach in which it can't be remediated because they're spending time figuring out, did this come through one vendor or another? So this notion of bringing together vendors into one solution set, that really is resonating. One of the reasons we were the leader in our vision on the last privileged access management report from Gartner just last week is because of just that, that we're consolidating solutions so that it's not a siloed approach. That really concerns CISOs, CIOs, in fact, the entire C-suite.
What makes privileged access management so hard? Because cyber criminals are kind of counting on the fact that they can escalate privileges whenever they hack into something. But it seems like we've had this problem for decades. So why can't we solve it?
Well, one of the things that has just doubled the challenge is everybody's now remote. So back in early March of 2020, most enterprises went from 90% on-site and 10% remote to flipping that. So our customers come to us and they'll say that protecting a much greater threat landscape is one of the big challenges. And the PAM market goes to addressing this area. However, it continues to be a challenge for security officers.
It seems like, if I think back in time, we all sort of walked away from the endpoint a little bit and focused more on the network firewall. And then we had the pandemic come and more of the ransomware attacks were aimed at the endpoint. So, are we now shifting to a point where maybe there is no perimeter and people are thinking about things really in terms of securing users and identities and then working their way back from there?
We are. I think you've hit the nail on the head, Michael, because the users are a key point of vulnerability, either accidentally, or there could be malice intent. So there are bad actors inside of the enterprise. And of course, to your point, there are bad actors outside of the enterprise. But since the endpoint is an ever changing and fluid environment, particularly with everybody being remote and virtual, if you can zero in on the individual, that's the starting point.
Today, most people assume that their username and password is sitting on the dark web somewhere. Is there a set of best practices in your mind for managing passwords that prevent that, or those passwords and usernames from being used in a malicious way? Do we need to change them more often? And what does that look like? Because it seems like we really don't do that very well.
Yes, so we think that is a best practice, but we have fairly direct protocols with that we advise our customers with that don't require ongoing password changes if you have the right identity management solution set implemented. So it's not necessarily a mandate to continue to change passwords. It really depends upon the solution. We at One Identity don't require that with our solutions.
You guys are connected to Quest or associated with Quest. So what's that relationship look like, and how might that evolve?
Well, it's a longstanding partnership. So we are a division of Quest, but with the announcing of my appointment just a couple of days ago, we also announced that we are going to begin the long journey of setting up One Identity as a separate entity. So that takes a significant amount of time. It could be measured in 12 to 18 months. There will always be a very, very tight partnership with Quest. The products come together in many appropriate fashions. Having said that, One Identity with separation, and as we take time to stand up as a separate entity, we'll have sole and singular focus on identity management.
All right. Looking out a year from now, what's the definition of success for you guys?
Well, we will have advanced in this journey to separate and stand ourselves up as a standalone entity. We will have delivered upon even more significant linkages on our unified platform, such that really that we don't see any competitors that have the suite of offerings that we have, Michael. And when we think enterprises, particularly large global enterprises, will more and more gravitate towards this type of solution set, we'll see the type of cross-reporting, cross-alert reporting, correlation reporting, and analytics that are really unmatched in the industry. So delivering on this vision a year from now, we think will put us in a very unique status within the identity management marketplace.
Great. Hey, Mark, best of luck.
Thank you, Michael. I really enjoyed meeting you, and I've enjoyed the interview.
All right. And thanks for being on the show.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Back to you guys in the studio.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Grant Gibson, who is the CISO for cyber, and we're going to be talking about cybersecurity, return on investment, and value, and how to measure all that good stuff. Grant, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
A lot of organizations seem to be struggling with this whole concept. I mean, ROI on cybersecurity has always been elusive because it's like proven a negative. But at the end of the day, we're at a point right now where people are a little more sensitive to costs in general. So how should folks go about thinking about measuring the value of their cybersecurity investments, and maybe what should they be thinking about to get more out of it?
Right. It's a great question. And I like to put it in the framework of sales sometimes, because businesses have a great idea of how to value sales, right? Because it drives revenue, it drives the business. So we have a lot of metrics in place. We have metrics that are for the board. We have metrics for the sales leaders. We have metrics for the sales team. We have all these metrics designed to push sales forward, to generate growth. And if we're not seeing growth, then to strategize on how to deal with that. We don't always have the same visibility into cybersecurity because, like you said, it's a negative, right? Cybersecurity is usually coming to say, hey, we've got these things we need to spend money on to deal with, right? And we're not going to generate revenue off of these ideas. So it's a tougher conversation with the board of directors or budgeting committees or any different way that goes to have. But finding ways to do that is what's going to drive more security for your organization. But why does your organization need security, right? That's the big thing. Why do we need, how much should we invest in it? And I think you have to start by I think you have to start by looking for something that is positive, and your data is positive. Your data is what runs your business. And being able to put value around your data can help you make business decisions on how to spend money on cybersecurity, how to metric out your cybersecurity program so that you can deliver good reports to people about where you are at in that program. And when you think about that data, you have to look at it in different ways. You have to look at your data, how your data is, what your data means to your business, right? So there's data that your customers provide you. There's data that you collect. There's data that's important to you. There's data that's important to hackers. What data is important to hackers and how valuable is that to hackers? That's a part of that equation too, right? What's the value to you? What's the value to your customers? What's the value to the hackers out there? And then you have to kind of think of it from a risk management standpoint, because that's what cybersecurity is at the end of the day. It's risk management. So it's taking how valuable I think my data is to me, right? What happens? What kinds of data do I have? What happens if that data is compromised or lost, right? In the case of a ransomware attack, you might lose data or at least have it locked up. But what if that's all your leads and you can't call anybody and do business? How is that valuable to your organization if you can't reach out to your contacts and to your leads and to your customers? That can be pretty damaging, right? Especially if it goes on for an extended period of time. If you're talking about a couple hours, okay, you can recover from that. But if you lost access to your data for a month, you can't contact your customers because you don't know who they are. You can't contact your new leads because you don't know who they are. That's a very valuable proposition to a business. And you have to be able to put it in perspective to understand how you're going to protect that, right? That's a worst case scenario. And that's where the risk management comes in. You take that data point and you say, okay, I've got this data point. What's the likelihood that I could lose access to this data versus what's the damage if I lost access to this data point, to this data? And then you have to be able to say, okay, this is a really big concern. We should really be spending some resources making sure that this particular thing doesn't happen. It's also important to look at it from the hacker's perspective when you're looking at that, right? Because a lot of times today we talk about social security numbers as being like the penultimate of a hacker getting into our system and get social security numbers for our customers, right? And that's a big data breach because now we have to go to our customers and say, hey, we lost your social security numbers. It's a big deal to your customers, but not nearly as big a deal as if you're in businesses that collect other type of data, like healthcare, right? Your medical records. If you're in the banking industry and you're dealing with loans, you're collecting pay stubs and identification and tax transcripts, and in some cases, maybe even medical records, because you need to prove something happened at some point that this is the way something is for a loan. If hackers get a hold of that, that's the kind of data that gets you a mortgage. Not just a $100 quick loan off the internet, which your social security number is going to get you, right? And so looking at the data you have and saying, well, how valuable is this to a hacker? How valuable is this to my organization to run? How valuable is this to my customer if it gets leaked? And then you can start making those risk-based decisions. You've quantified what you have that you're trying to protect, and now you can quantify metrics around how you're going to protect it. And there's a lot of ways out there to do that, but you have to start there. You got to, what am I protecting? Why is it important?
So a long time ago, there was this German emperor, Frederick the Great, said, if you try to defend everything, you wind up defending nothing. So is this kind of the same conversation, but we need to figure out what data matters most and kind of work our way out. Right now, it seems like historically, we just kind of fortified the perimeter, but that became just indefensible.
Right, and that's kind of the truth. It's a lot of the other problem with metrics inside of the system and why it's viewed negatively is because what does the board want to hear? The board wants to hear we're not going to get hacked. Well, that's impossible, right? Nobody can guarantee you're not going to get hacked. There's no company out there with security so good that they can guarantee they won't be hacked. And that's challenging because that's what the board wants to hear when you go and present metrics to them. When you report on your cybersecurity program, they want to hear, hey, we're in good shape. Nobody's going to hack us. And that's what they want to hear. But that's not something you can necessarily give them, right? You can't tell them we're not going to be hacked. You're going to talk about the things you've done to prevent that hack, which is what we should be doing. It's a challenging thing, and it's not just the perimeter, right? You have to look at the different pieces of the puzzle that get you there. Technically, we have very good reactive ways to measure security. We can say, hey, to the board, we had the 5 nines. Many CIOs out there are going to be familiar with 5 nines. That's 99.999% uptime, right? And can we look back at last year and say we had that uptime and it wasn't because, and we didn't lose it because of a hack? We can say, hey, we're doing our job, but that's not a good predictor, right? And that's why we have metrics. We don't necessarily just have metrics to see how we performed. We have metrics to see how we will perform. And unfortunately, just because you had 99.99% uptime last year, you didn't have a major hack, that doesn't mean that you won't have one the next year. So it's really drilling down into those risks and start looking for what data is important to me and how am I going to protect that particular data, right? If somebody does get in, can they get to this really important data, right? Who's protecting that kind of data? And those are really important conversations that IT teams need to have with their different departments, because IT might not know, right? IT might not know what's important to a different department. Accounting may have a different idea of what's important data than sales does, or compliance does, or the various other opportunities that they're out there for the hackers to get into, right? They need to really dig down into other departments and see, okay, where's our important data? What's important to business operations? And then start risk managing that and saying, okay, we're going to start here and set up a program for these, and we're going to work our way back. And there's the general stuff too, right? You got to have good firewalls in place. You got to have limits on what can come in and out of your network, but you also have to focus on specific segments.
The tough part about being in the security space, of course, is that the bad guys only got to be right once and you got to be right 100% of the time. But how should organizations think about evaluating cybersecurity people? I mean, because there are going to be breaches. So how do I kind of take an assessment of this and, to your point, come up with some metrics that are fair and reasonable?
Right. Well, I think you literally have to stop looking at it as a fact that we're going to prevent all the attacks, right? We've got to change the board mindset that we're going to prevent it. It's got to become about mitigation to prevent the attack, or if there is an attack, prevent the breadth of the attack. So how much data did they get? Where did they get? What were they able to do? At the same time, you have to have the conversation that we also need to focus on detecting these attacks. We also need to focus on responding and recovering from these attacks, because attacks are going to happen. There's not a lot of companies out there that have had no type of breach whatsoever. Maybe it was spam, maybe it was phishing, maybe it was a small malware incident, maybe it wasn't a major cybersecurity attack, but you've probably experienced an attack at any size organization at some point. You certainly had somebody attempt to get into your organization, right? If you've got phishing emails from somebody in a foreign country trying to get you transfer them funds, that's a type of attack, right? So we've all experienced that low level attack. Some of us experience higher level of attacks, and sometimes those attacks are successful. We can't look at it as we've got to get over this, because we are being attacked. You're being attacked. I'm being attacked. Some of them are successful. Many of them are very small, but that's happening. So part of it is just understanding what's our attack, what does our attack surface look like? And that's not just from the perspective of how can people attack us, that's how are we being attacked, right? And start having metrics around that. How are we being attacked? What are we seeing? And then we can go into whether they were minor or major and start having that conversations, because that will help organizations change their perspective from we're trying to prevent this attack. And if you didn't prevent this attack, your job should be at risk to this is how many attacks we're mitigating every day, every week, every month. This is how many are getting through. This is the severity of those attacks. This is what we're worried about next in those attacks. And this is where we need to shift our focus. And that's where people need to be.
We talk a lot about the shortage in cybersecurity personnel, of course. And I guess the question that comes to mind is, does this level of attention to the metrics, though, add to the stress, which then burns more people out? And then we wind up with, a lot of good people leaving the space. And, or has this become something of a vicious cycle?
Well, we're not going to get over that hump anytime soon. It does. Listen, we can't not have metrics in this industry. It's not going to work. We're a data-driven society. We're a data-driven society for a good reason. It works. It's effective. It needs to be a part of the industry, but it is going to increase stress because we're rarely going in with good data to say, hey, attacks are down this year as a whole 20%, right? If anything, attacks go up every year, right? There's never going to be a time anytime soon that I know of where attempts are not made, right? And it's going to be tough to continue to have those conversations. It's going to be stressful, but we have to do it. I think what we need to do is we need to be realistic as the cybersecurity community with our counterparts in accounting and leadership and compliance and all these other departments that we may work with, that we're going to go through a tough period, and these numbers are not going to look good. And we've got to get our hands around them, though, so that we can get to a place where we do feel more comfortable and we do feel more confident. And I would say that if you are a cybersecurity person that's in an organization where you're very confident in your cybersecurity, that's probably not a good thing, because you're probably overconfident in your cybersecurity. And if your board wants to be confident about their cybersecurity, they might be overconfident in their cybersecurity, and that's not necessarily a good thing, because now you're not preparing for what's going to come, and something is going to come in some form, and hopefully you're able to mitigate it. But it is, and there's just no quick solution for this, right? It's a stressful field. How different are you from a police environment? Well, your life may not be in danger every day, but crime's not going away. Police have to deal with these stressful environments every day that they're going out to stop crime. And it's not going away, and the metrics aren't going to get great, and there's always going to be crime. Cybersecurity is in the same place, right? It's a tough job. We've got to deal with it, though, because if we don't, it's not just our organization's data. It's our data, right? The organization has my data because I work for them. And no matter what organization I go to, that's going to be the case. The economy depends on all our organizations to do well, right? And if all the organizations are struggling because we're walking away from cybersecurity, that's not going to help us individually as well, right? Because we're going to find stress from other places as our data gets released and different things like that. And it can hurt the economy and those other things. So, it's just a tough place to be. And I feel for you in the cybersecurity world. I understand it's a tough place to be. It's tough to present these numbers. It's tough to try to put up metrics. It's tough to try to work with the budgets that we've got in today's environment, but we've got to make the best of what we have because it's important. And the attackers are not going away. They're going to continue to try. We've just got to do our best to get everybody on board to create a good cybersecurity culture. And that's an important part of this.
Do you think we can win this battle? I mean, or is the playing field so uneven that we're just fundamentally disadvantaged? Or, are the bad guys getting better and smarter? Or, what's your assessment of the current state of things?
Can we win this battle? That's a trick question. You can't stop cybersecurity. It depends on your definition of win, right? Cybersecurity attacks no longer exist. Never going to happen. You can't win that battle. For me, it comes back to this idea of culture. Culturally, do you have an organization that's cyber resilient, right? Do they mitigate well? Do they detect? Do they respond? Do they recover? And a lot of that's not just in your policies or your technical compliance or things. A lot of that's in the culture. 95% of cyber attacks are generally caused by human error. Now, this is a broad term, human error, right? This could mean we didn't patch things on time. This could mean we didn't see a vulnerability. This could mean someone in a department that has nothing to do with security clicked on an email link or gave information out over the phone. Or recently, we've seen hacking groups attempt to bribe employees that are struggling to pay gas money, $250 to get their password and their multi-factor authentication. How does a security team stop that? How does a security team stop an employee who's struggling for gas and is being offered $250 to offer the username, their password, and then give them the multi-factor authentication code they got on their phone? There's no way that a security team can beat a hack like that. But when we start measuring the culture of cybersecurity within our organization, do people recognize phishing and attacks? Are they trained well? Do they know they need to protect their password? Do they know that they're potentially compromising themselves when they share this information, right? That they could then in turn be hacked. Do they understand the risks and their responsibilities and the impacts on them personally if these things happen? And as we get that better cultural awareness, we will reduce a lot of attacks because, again, it's not because our firewalls are failing necessarily. It's not because our SIEM tool didn't tell us. It's not because we didn't have access to the patches necessarily that's doing this. It's human error that's creating the opportunity most of the time. And so as we do things like that, we can start to get to a place where we feel better about cybersecurity, where we do mitigate a lot of attacks and we do make it much harder for the hackers to get in. Is it going to go away and stop? No, we're not going to win that battle, but we can reduce it a lot as we organizationally as we culturally adopt better cybersecurity within our organizations.
We hear a lot about all things AI these days. Is AI going to save us from ourselves? Is this some sort of, maybe not a silver bullet, but certainly something that will level the playing field, or is there more hype than reality?
AI is going to be an amazing tool. How powerful it's going to be and when it's going to be that powerful is hard to understand, right? Because we're in the infancy of AI. I watched last year and somebody's talking in a lecture not too long ago about how mature cybersecurity was getting. And it is. Cybersecurity is mature at this point. It's been around since the 80s. We've still got a long way to go, but it's mature. AI is not mature. It is in its infancy. And it's going to do a lot for us, and it's going to catch a lot of things. But how and when we get to a pinnacle point where it's good enough that we don't need humans, nobody can predict that. Is that going to be in 10 years, 50 years, 100 years? We don't know. But it is going to get to a point where it's certainly very helpful in the near future, right? It's going to do a lot for us in the near future. But again, how does AI detect that someone's been bribed to give up their credentials and log somebody in with their MFA? It's going to be a long time before AI can detect that. We do talk a lot about identity management, and bringing AI into identity management to see that you are who you say you are is going to do a lot for us, right? Because they've got AI now that can notate that you are who you are based off the way you type on a keyboard, right? So if you're not the one typing and we can tell that you're not the one typing, well, you're not the identity, right? You're not the person we thought you were, and we can lock you out and do different things like that. So it's going to make significant advances for us in the short term, but is it going to get rid of our need for humans to be involved? Not anytime soon. I think we're still pretty far away from that, but I think it's going to help. I think we're going to get good at it, and just a matter of when.
All right. Hey, Grant, thanks for reminding us to have a little empathy for our friends in cybersecurity.
Absolutely.
All right. And once again, we hope to have you back on the show one of these days soon. Hey, guys, once again, thanks for the time, and back to you guys in the studio.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, we're back here in Valencia, right on the floor of KubeCon, Cloud Native Con, and actually I should say we are in Hall 1.
Yes.
There are actually 2 halls of Expo here at KubeCon. And I thought yesterday this was the crowded one, but I went next door and that one's more crowded.
Just as much happening there.
So it is. I've heard estimates of about 8,000 people.
Yeah.
In KubeCon this year, and that's fantastic. We're sorry you're not here, but we're glad you're joining in with us online. Our next guest is Owen Garrett. Owen is with Defense. Owen, welcome.
Hi, Alan. Thank you very much.
Pleasure to have you here. So, Owen, let's start off with this, though. A lot of folks may not be familiar with Defense, believe it or not.
Oh, that's very fair.
Yeah. Why don't we give them a little Defense background?
Sure. Defense, we're a startup. Mm-hmm. In fact, we're a finalist right now in SC Magazine's most exciting startups of the year.
Very cool.
Which is really, really cool.
Uh-huh.
And we have a combination of open source and enterprise solutions to help organizations find vulnerabilities in production applications and then secure those applications against attack.
Got it. Excellent. let's talk about how you do. So that's a very, actually, before we jump into that, your position with defense?
So I look after our product roadmap, our product strategy, and our community strategy.
Excellent. All right, let's dive into the security. How, you said you have a combination of open source and enterprise, and let's get into it.
We can unpack that.
Yeah, go ahead.
There's a really good story with it.
Okay.
We've worked really hard to build the right product to help the open source users in the market and then extend it further. So we often begin with one question to our users. You're running applications in Kubernetes. Do you know if they're secure or not?
Right.
And people will nod and say, well, my development team has signed off. There's great tools that they use to look for vulnerable dependencies and components. They say yes, to the best of their knowledge, with some exceptions, it's secure. But I'm responsible for our production platform. And there are emerging vulnerabilities. There were exceptions that the development team had to make, and there's a lot of stuff that I'm running in my platform that the development team never signed off on. It's part of the infrastructure, it's third-party code.
Sure.
And this is the problem that we solve. So we will look at your production platform, we'll scan it, we'll inventory the applications that you've built and the third-party components that you're running, and we'll look for vulnerabilities.
So that's the third-party components within the application.
That's right.
So for instance, a Struts version 2.
Yes.
Or a Log4j or these types of things.
So we'll look for those. Those are dependencies of the application. We find issues in there, but also third-party apps. So maybe you've got an agent from Sysdig that does monitoring, or you've got some other solutions that do log management. We can scan those. So those come from a third-party vendor. We'll check those. Have they got a legacy Struts or Log4j module within them?
Right.
So it's all about looking through your production infrastructure, scanning everything, finding vulnerable components that could be exploited, and often there's, as you know, there's thousands of them. And I talk to people and they say, yeah, we use scanning tools, we have an unimaginable number of issues, we don't know how to deal with them. So the other thing we do with our open source platform is we then rank these vulnerabilities, and we tell you these 6 vulnerabilities are the ones that pose the greatest risk to your application. Because, for example, they're network exploitable, they're close to the attack surface. They're reachable, exactly. So if you want to know what do you have to fix first to improve the security of your applications, then Defense Threat Mapper, our open source project, will tell you exactly that.
Excellent. I find this interesting. So my background is in security. Sure. Started a company in 2001, still secure. And in 2003, we came out with our first vulnerability management tool. Yep. And many of the things you're talking about, we were talking about back then. What's old is new, but because we've never solved the problem is the issue.
Yeah.
Right? We still think it's okay to have a telephone book of vulnerabilities. And we still say, well, let me figure out where you're going to get most bang for your buck.
Yep.
If you just patch these 6 things, you're going to close this many vulnerabilities.
Yes.
Yeah, you still have this many, but we're going to help you get rid of these. And these are the most serious.
Yes. So that's what we do. And we believe passionately that everybody should be building applications that are more secure and operating them so they're more secure. I don't want my mother to have to suffer an identity theft attack because she used a mobile app and the developer or the team didn't secure it properly.
Yep.
Yet all of this security information, it's in the community. There's a huge community building
more than there ever was.
More than there ever was.
No, I mean, that was what held us back then.
Yeah, this telephone book is huge, and that's why we're open source through and through. So our product, you can deploy that on any cloud native environment, and we will inventory your production environments.
So I just want to make sure it's purely production, it's not pre-production. There's not a shift left aspect.
So there's a really interesting distinction there. So the shift left movement has served developers really, really well. There's lots of great developer tools so they can sign off on an app and say, this is good, and here are the documented exceptions. But once the application goes into production, the value of that sign-off, it stops. It's frozen. And picking up you need to be able to identify new vulnerabilities in that production application whether it's running in a prod environment or running in a pre-prod environment.
Right.
Once the application's deployed, the developer's influence
Well,
tends to
they're
stop.
right. They're done at that point. So and again, I've been in this space a really long time.
Yep.
What I've come to realize is that shift left is great.
It is.
But you need a shift right as well.
You're exactly right.
So, and this is such a problem in technology. We focus on the latest thing at the expense of everything else.
Everything else.
Yes, it's great to give the developers some security insights and security tools so they can develop more secure software. That doesn't mean security stops right there.
You're absolutely
pick
right.
this up. And of course, in today's environments with Kubernetes and Mesh and Cloud Native and APIs and all of this stuff, you can't just put your application behind a web application firewall and say, oh, I'm good.
You're right. Your application's like an open city.
Yeah.
You can't put a wall around it.
No.
And that's why our motto at Deep Fence is shift left and secure right.
Excellent.
So our threat mapper, open source product, that's all about shifting left and looking for vulnerabilities in production. But the reality is you can't fix all those vulnerabilities. And there could be issues that even threat mapper doesn't pick up. So that's where our enterprise product kicks in. With the open source product, you find the issues, you can go and fix them as fast as possible. With our enterprise product, you can also secure those applications in real time.
In automation.
Your application is like an open city, and attackers are roaming through. You don't know what they're doing. They're attacking buildings, they're attacking services, they're exfiltrating data. And with our enterprise threat striker product, we then start from the map of vulnerabilities and we watch what happens in your application. We install network sensors. So we see what is coming into your application. eBPF-based sensors. So it's like looking at a city, we see the bad guys knocking on doors, trying locks to see if something's open. We install sensors inside the application using kernel interfaces, so no app modifications. So we see things happen in the app. A process crashes, a file system is modified, and we look at outgoing network data. So we see exfiltration attempts. And we put all of this together with a really smart correlation engine so we can understand the growing threat against each of your workloads. Is the workload just being probed by someone running a scanning tool? Or have they found a beachhead? Have they got in? What are they doing now they're in? Are they spreading laterally? And we can piece together all the little signals in our Threat Striker product to figure out what is the story of the attack. And finally, if necessary, you can use us to turn on protection. So if we think the container's been compromised, we can delete it. If we think a pod has been compromised, we can tell Kubernetes to kill it and restart it. If we think that a particular IP is sending a large volume of attack traffic, we can surgically firewall that one source for that container. So you can use us to protect your application very, very quickly against a whole range of attacks.
Love it. Oh, and I know you guys announced some news around here at the show.
Yeah,
it's
been a big week.
Okay.
So our Threat Striker product, it's a sophisticated application. You deploy it on a Kubernetes platform, you deploy sensors in your production platform. We want to make that easier. We want to help people who want to try it out, to evaluate it. We want to help people who need to scale it in production. And so we've announced a SaaS platform called Deep Fence Cloud. And with a couple of clicks, you can sign in, you can spin up a Threat Striker instance. We will host it for you on our Kubernetes cluster. We'll look after the maintenance and the security and the scaling and the upgrading of that so that you can see the benefits of Threat Striker without having to deal with the task of installing and managing it. Security causes a lot of friction. The best security tools are frictionless, and we're about making it as easy as possible for you to secure your applications.
I love it, my friend. All right, hey, we're about out of time. We're going to take a break. We've got more folks waiting here in the wings.
Yeah, it's been a busy week, hasn't it?
Busier than I thought, in all honesty. I mean, I was surprised the amount of people here. good though.
It is great
to be back. Hey,
it's been a
best of
pleasure.
luck with
Thank
Deep
you very
Fence.
much.
Oh wait, is it deepfence.com?
It's deepfence.io.
.io.
Yep, so find us at deepfence.io. Find us on GitHub, grab Threat Mapper, give us a star if you like it, try it out, reach out to our community Slack, say hi. We'd love to talk to you.
Thank you. Owen Garrett, Deepfence, deepfence.io. We'll be back here in a moment.
Been a pleasure.
Thank you, man.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey, everyone. We're back here at Broadcast Alley RSA Conference. It's Wednesday. We're in Moscone West. We are live. It's almost 9:30 here West Coast time. It's probably lunchtime if you're watching this back in the East Coast. Late afternoon if you're home in Europe. Wherever you are, thanks for joining in. Our next guest is someone I actually had the pleasure of meeting yesterday at our DevSecOps event, DevOps Connect here at RSA, and then at the after party afterwards, we had a chance to talk a little bit. But let me introduce you to Chris Scharf. Chris is with HackerOne. Chris, man, welcome.
Hey, thank you so much. It's great to be here. Great to be speaking with everybody around the world. And really looking forward to talking with you.
Absolutely. So, Chris, I want to do two things, get them out of the way. Number one, let's talk a little bit about HackerOne.
Okay.
You know, I first became familiar with HackerOne because your CEO, Martin Mickens, is someone, obviously, I've been in tech a long time. He's a name we followed, MySQL, all of these things. But beyond Martin Mickens being involved, I didn't know a lot about HackerOne. And I'm sure there are people out here who don't know a lot about HackerOne. So share with us a little.
Yeah, so HackerOne actually has, I think, a pretty innovative approach to security. We're really about crowdsourcing in the community. So there's so much talent out there, so many security researchers. Some of these are 16-year-old kids who have way better hacking skills than I do.
Yep.
They
do.
and industry professionals. And so we have this community of researchers. We work with hacker education, capture the flag type programs. And then we layer on top of that vulnerability disclosure programs. So see something, say something, a way to safely report vulnerabilities that you find. Along with bug bounty programs, which I think people have maybe heard about a little bit, but may not know about.
Sure.
But a way for companies to get those researchers to report vulnerabilities, reward the researchers for their time and effort, along with pen testing and code review and a number of other kind of security related functions.
So, I mean, to me, it's really about sort of, it's not unionizing because that's a political word, but let's use crowdsourcing instead. Kind of crowdsourcing the if we could call it the hacker community, and I don't hacker in a good way, not the black hat evil people, right?
Correct.
Kind of crowdsourcing, harnessing the power of this community in very distinct, productive ways, not kind of Wild West. I mean, I'll give you, for instance, I sit here at Techstrong, we have a lot of sites. We get emails all the time from researchers. We found this bug, we found that bug, we found a backdoor, a buffer overflow. And the interesting thing is we don't really develop software, right? We're a media company. We 99.999959% of what we use is off-the-shelf third-party software.
Right.
It's SaaS, it's whatever. We can't even fix half the things they send me. I pass it along to the software company who does them. But it's a system that was in need of organization, right? You want to call it, whatever you want to call it, crowdsourcing, unionization, whatever. But there's some conformity here. Look, this is best practices.
Right.
This is what you should do. This is how you do bug bounty. This is how we report vulnerabilities, responsible disclosures, stuff like that. And we've been trying to do it here in the security industry for a long time, quite frankly.
Right.
But it was always kind of kumbaya, do the right thing kind of stuff.
With
That's
very different definitions of what the right thing is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's good to see a company that's kind of trying to bring that together and put some real, pen to paper on. That's so old fashioned. But put pen to paper on it, right? Or keystrokes to code, or whatever you want to call it. For people who are interested, let's get it out of the way. What's the website?
HackerOne.com.
Easy enough.
Yes.
And that's one, O-N-E, not the number one.
Correct.
Okay. Let's talk about you, though, Chris. Give people a little background on your background.
So I've been working in the IT and security space, SaaS, for the last 25 years, at a point where I had to teach people what SaaS was and how to capitalize it. Worked in email security, worked web application firewalls, SASE, product zero trust security. And then in the last year, I joined HackerOne because I just found that they were doing something I thought was, sort of really exciting and different, and a chance to help customers solve real problems. So it's been exciting.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
What kind of problems customers are solving?
So part of what you described, so we're getting these reports of vulnerabilities. They come in via email. Sometimes it's, I found this problem, security bug. I'll tell you what it is if you give me 3 Bitcoin.
Right.
Troy Hunt, I think, coined the term beg bounties.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I got a good word for it. That's what we get a lot of.
Right. And so, sometimes it's they tweet at the CFO, and the CFO freaks out. Right. Like we have somebody tweeted to me. We have
a bad vulnerability.
Right?
Yeah.
All hands on deck.
Pull the alarm.
Right.
Break the glass.
Exactly. Unplanned work. So things like the vulnerability or bug bounty program, there's some rigor for submitting these vulnerabilities. It's tell me what CVE or CWE it is. Tell me that we'll do a CVSS scoring. Tell me steps to reproduce, work to validate that. And so streamlining that for those teams to take that intake so that they're not getting pinged by the CFO at 3:00 in the morning, doing the crazy fire drills. That
Priceless.
alone.
Priceless.
Yeah,
like the
exactly.
MasterCard commercial, right? Priceless. Very cool. Let's talk a little bit about RSA, right?
Yeah.
It's, look, this isn't a pre-COVID RSA in terms of, pre-COVID, we were getting 45,000 people here. But this is certainly more people than I've been around in the last 2 years.
It is.
What's your impression?
My first RSA was 2019. And that was 45,000 attendees. And frankly, it was overwhelming to me. Even, this is pre-COVID. We were all out and about and interacting with people, but it was just so crowded. So many people.
It's big.
Right, so big. This year, numbers I heard before I came were around 20,000 attendees.
Yeah, that's what they were looking for.
And so I feel like still just as many vendors, but I'm having much more interesting conversations, the crush of people. The types of conversations, the problems they're trying to solve have sort of exploded over the last 2 years, but it's really been great and well attended globally. Which is amazing.
So I've been going to RSA every year since 2002.
Okay.
So I've been to a few. And you're right, they were progressively getting bigger and bigger. Now they're 45,000. What back then, 20,000 now. The buzz is back though. This seems normal, right? It seems pretty normal. The expo floor is alive, right? The keynotes are well attended. The parties are back. So, in that regard, I think also part of it though is and the reason for it is that security continues to become a bigger and bigger and more of a mainstream kind of mindset, right? People are savvy that we got security issues,
right?
We got to do something. What are the solutions? So I think as security becomes a higher and higher priority, this show in many ways represents the security industry to the world, and it reflects that.
Yeah, I think I've seen, in the last 3 or 4 years, a trend of in SEC filings for companies, they're calling out specific security vendors that they're using.
That's the world we live in now.
And their board members are looking for somebody. It's been in the past people that could connect you with other companies or had financial, but now they're really looking for at least someone on the board that has a deep security background as well to help guide and shepherd these companies. And so, I think it's becoming. The business cares more and more about the security aspects because it's critical to their future.
I agree with you 100%, man. Yeah. Anything else new, exciting you want to jump in on here?
A couple things at least at HackerOne, and then I would love to talk about any other security stuff that's going on in the world, or dogs, which is a topic we talked about last night a bit. So we've been working with attack surface management companies where they're bringing in all these assets. And to me, this has been one of the challenges that companies are trying to solve is developers are deploying code so quickly. Their marketing teams are bringing up new resources. Like you talked about, some of them you don't even host. Right. And it's really easy to take a credit card out
and just be done
and bring a bunch of new infrastructure up. And so, we're working with these companies to try to risk rank that because you'd love to test everything as thoroughly as you possibly could, but you've got to risk rank it and prioritize it. And so, having those conversations, that's really what we've been focused on, having conversations this year at RSA with customers about is how are you doing that? How are you prioritizing that? How can we take that unionized, democratized, marshaled force of researchers and
so I'll tell you, it's funny. I think when we first started this third-party SaaSification or third-party reliance, one of the reasons you did the third-party stuff was, I don't want to worry about that. I don't care who their suppliers are. That's their problem. I just want one throat to choke.
Right.
And that fueled that whole third-party thing for a long time. But now we've come to find out that, you know what? Not good. We can't just set it and forget it. We need to understand who our third-party suppliers are.
Right.
And if we don't, we wind up, with SolarWinds kind of situations or software supply chain SBOM stuff.
Yeah. It's it's a little trivial, but the cloud is just other people's computers. And so
we can't forget that. And we, though we want to trust those people, we got to do what we got to do.
Yeah, and in the past it's been like, who do you do pen test? What are you doing from a security perspective? And so moving beyond, the SaaS companies are doing releases generally at a minimum every 2 weeks. Some of them daily, some hourly. If I'm doing annual pen tests, that's a great point in time snapshot, right? And so, what are you doing more proactively? And I don't know. At some point, your eyes glaze over if they start talking to you about their DAST and other.
There is a lot of that. DAST, SAST, IAST, and software composition analysis.
Right.
But yet, the people who are contributing to HackerOne live for that stuff too.
They do,
and that's the beautiful part of it. Anyway, hey man, we're about out of time.
Yeah.
Something's going on there. HackerOne.com. Check it out.
Hacker101.com if you want our free educational and capture the flags.
Absolutely.
That's 101.
Oh, okay. Very cool. Binary.
Hacker101. Yes.
Yeah. All righty.
All right.
Hey, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Chris.
Have a great RSA.
You too. We are live here at RSA Conference. It's Wednesday. We're going to be right back.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
Hi again, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed today's episode of Techstrong TV. We had several high-profile interviews to keep you up to date on what's happening in the tech industry. From CISO Talk to View with Vizard, today was packed full of great content. We'll be back again on Thursday, so please join us for that. Once again, thanks for watching, and we hope to see you again. As always, stay strong, tech strong.